Whoop. All right, welcome back to the party, everybody. I'm your host, Lutch, a.k.a. the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Everybody hit that like and subscribe. You know I would do it for you. And let's party. Big shout out to the replay gang. Thank you so much for coming back to watch this, even though you missed the live party. Guys, that is the best part, so make sure you are here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, and sometimes whenever I feel like it. So hit that subscribe, ring the bell, and you will never miss an Indian Jesus live party ever again. If you'd like to support the channel, head on over to theindianjesus.com for your very own official Indian Jesus merch. You can also join our free Discord server. It is absolutely free to join. We have a bunch of free channels. We are in there 24/7 hanging out, having a good time. And like I said, it is absolutely free to join. But if you join as a member of this channel, just scroll right below the video here and hit that join button and become a member of the channel. You not only get members-only live streams here on YouTube, but you also get full access to the Discord server, which includes the after party. That's right. As soon as we are done here, we are going over to the Discord video chat where we don't have to worry about any YouTube censors and you are not stuck behind your keyboard. You're actually on screen with me and everybody else. It is a good time. Come and join us. So I'm hoping that that this is going to be the first of many, the first of a new series where we learn about philosophy. We talk about philosophy and moral philosophy and how personally, as an atheist, I don't feel like, we need religion anymore, and that, we need to get beyond that. And that includes learning about philosophy. But it's kind of difficult to get into that and jump into the weeds. Fortunately, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. The channel Crash Course, headed up by PBS, actually did an entire playlist of a crash course on philosophy. And so we're going to dive into that. I'm hoping. I don't know what their copyright is like, but considering this is for educational purposes and it's PBS, I'm hoping they will be good with us. So again, we're just going to jump in with the first one. There's 46 chapters to this whole playlist, and I figured we'll just go through a couple of videos per stream and talk about what they have, and hopefully it'll spark some interesting conversations, but also give us a better perspective to talk about these things in the context of politics, at least, if not religion as well. Shout out to King Nirvana. Welcome to the party. Good to see you. As always, guys, if you cannot hear the video, please do let me know.
I'm Hank Green, and you and I are about to embark on a journey of inquiry into the whole world, your world, in an effort to figure out what gives it meaning, what makes it beautiful, where its evils come from, and ultimately what is the very nature of reality itself. Along the way, we're going to question every aspect of your own personal life. Why do you do what you do? Why do you think what you think? Why do you feel what you feel? Now, if you've joined me on Crash Course before, you might say, we've already learned all that stuff, like in psychology and biology and anatomy and physiology, and it's true, science can definitely help us understand our thoughts and feelings and actions. But on this particular journey, we're going to be exploring aspects of the human condition that can't be explained only by hormones or neurotransmitters, by personal experiences or hereditary conditions. Because all of those chemicals and experiences that make us who we are can actually raise as many questions as they answer. Like, if all of my decisions really are just the result of how I was raised and what chemicals I have flowing through my brain, then are any of my choices actually free? And
free will. And so, not only here, but there's a bunch of other playlists of things that they've done an entire series on. I did leave the link to the entire philosophy playlist in the description if you would like to check out what they've done.
If I'm not truly free to make my own decisions or choose my own actions, then how can I be held accountable for them? Yeah, it's gonna be that kind of journey. Rather than just looking at the world and describing what we see, we'll be evaluating it. We will take nothing as given, set our assumptions aside, or
believe nothing except that anything is possible.
At least try really hard to, and do our best to see the world as if we've never seen it before. And for what it's worth, we'll also be talking about Batman and what Dick Grayson can teach us about the concept of identity. And we'll learn.
That's another good thing that I really appreciate about this series is that it's light and it gets relatively deep into things, but it uses only what's necessary. And so, like, if you this is going to be a great way to be introduced to these things and allow us to have conversations. But it's not going to be, some boring lecture about, everything that this person, this philosopher thought or that philosopher thought. And he uses a lot of pop culture references and memes and stuff like that. So hopefully, I think we're gonna enjoy it. I'm definitely gonna enjoy it. I hope you guys do.
For what it's worth, we'll also be talking about Batman and what Dick Grayson can teach us about the concept of identity. And we'll learn how The Matrix can help us understand the life and writing of Rene Descartes. Also, we'll try to answer unanswerable questions and puzzle over paradoxes that have plagued geniuses for thousands of years. It's gonna be hard and enlightening and frustrating, and if I do my job properly, it'll stick with you long after you and I have parted ways.
So this is, just the first one here. They're kind of talking about what is philosophy. Let's jump ahead to that. No, I don't use the name brand. I get the whatchamacallit, the generic. It's a little cheaper, and they just switched my generic to a better generic, and if you know. So let's dive in with what is philosophy.
These days, people use the word philosophy to describe some opinion they might have or an approach they have to a certain topic. Like, you might have a philosophy when it comes to golf, though I personally do not. But we are going to use this word more narrowly to describe a way of approaching the world that traces its roots back to ancient Greece, 500 years before the Common Era. This was a time of great intellectual movement around the world. Buddhism and Jainism were developing in Asia at the same time philosophical thought was emerging in Greece. There, scholars were tangled up in a distinction they were just beginning to make between philos and mythos, or what we'd now roughly call science and storytelling. At that time, there were bards like Homer who were trying to understand and explain the world through stories, while the earliest philosophers were using methods that were more analytical and scientific, although they didn't really have the concept of science back then.
Right, and I've always long held the notion that religion itself is a good thing for humanity in the history. That we've always used these types of stories to try to explain the universe around us. But as you'll come to see, maybe we've moved beyond that a little bit.
And so, philosophia, literally the love of wisdom, was a new way of trying to make sense of the world. When the earliest philosophers used the word philosophy, they basically meant the academic study of anything, which, I guess, could include golf. But at what we might call the first universities in the Western world, Plato's Academy and its rival Aristotle's Lyceum, math, biology, physics, poetry, political science, and astronomy were all considered to be philosophy. Eventually, scholars began thinking of these fields differently, as separate disciplines. Studies that had strong empirical elements came to be considered science, a search for answers. But philosophy came to be understood more as a way of thinking about questions. Big questions. And today, 2,500 years after the ancient Greeks first brought them up, philosophers still love asking questions, oftentimes the same questions, and they don't mind that they never get an answer. So,
that's another big part of philosophy, is understanding that you're not going to get an answer to everything, that you might spend your entire life focused on the pursuit of one question, and may never get an answer to it. And that's okay. That has to be okay. You can't be in a state where you feel like you have to know something. If it can't be known, then that's going to cause that cognitive dissonance, and you'll just start buying into something so that you can have an answer when you don't really have an answer.
What are these big questions that have managed to intrigue and stump philosophers for so long? One of the first might best be phrased as, what is the world like? Sounds simple enough to answer, right? Like, just look around and see all the stuff. Well, this is what the world is like.
But take a moment with that. What is the world like? Okay, imagine an alien came down and you had to, they just asked you, okay, what is this world like? It's a broad question. That's a broad question.
The philosophical approach isn't just based on observation. It has other, much more complex questions packed inside it. When a philosopher wonders what the world is like, she might really be asking, what's the nature of reality? Is the world just made up of matter and energy, or is there something else going on? And if it is just matter and energy, then where did it all come from? Is there a god? And if so, then what is he or she or it like? And for that matter, when you're asking about the world, can you also be asking about the nature of yourself as a citizen of the world?
And that's a big part of what we are going to focus on. As a citizen of the world, a citizen of the country. King says, if you got the answer for it all, it might take away from the point. Yeah, I think the journey, the it's not always about the destination, it's about the journey. And just having all the answers to life might not be a very good position to be in. That might be like, okay, now what? And so the idea of having more to learn is absolutely the point of life. Where is everybody? Hey, there we go. We got Guamtech in the building. Welcome to the party. Good to see you. Good to see you. Go hit up. Go to Discord and ask everybody where the hell they are. I started a few minutes early, but damn, I didn't think everybody would punish me by not coming at all. Damn. Welcome to the party.
You're asking about the world, can you also be asking about the nature of yourself as a citizen of the world? So, what kind of being am I? Do I have a soul? Is there something immaterial about me that will survive after I die? All of these questions are ways of exploring what philosophers call metaphysics, one of the three main branches of philosophy, an effort to understand the fundamental nature of the world, of the universe, and of being. Now, if those questions aren't heady enough for you,
we got our boy Stephen Colbert Cheese in the building. Welcome to the party, sir.
We, as students of philosophy, also have a whole separate set of questions that are about how we know the answers to any of this stuff. This particular strain of philosophy, which is like knowing about knowing, is epistemology, literally the study of knowledge, the second major field of philosophy. And it poses questions like, is the world really what I think it is? Like, really, is everything I see and think and experience, is it actually true? If it is,
and the answer is always no.
Isn't, and what is true, and what's the best way to go about figuring out the truth? Is science the best way, or are there more ethereal paths to truth? Paths that science can never really travel. And let's say that after a lot of searching and question asking, I begin to develop some ideas, like an inkling about what might be true. Then, how do I know if I'm right? How will I ever know I'm wrong? Can I ever be certain about anything? Now, at this point, I wouldn't blame you if you're thinking, am I real? Do I know anything? Well, as questions go, these might not seem super practical, but there's another area of philosophy that helps frame your thinking around what you actually do, like how you should act and what you should attach meaning to. It's called...
Yeah, so there are 46 episodes to this series, and this is kind of just an overview on what philosophy is in general, but by the next episode, they start getting into different types of philosophy, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. King Nirvana said, all I know is they should tap that like button, but one day you will get too big, and then these more personal streams may end. I hate change, but want you to succeed. Thank you. I very much appreciate that. And I mean, you know, I think there's a lot, there's going to, eventually, you're right. When the chat's going, I'm not going to be able to stop and react to every single one. We're already kind of getting there. But that doesn't mean that I'm not, keeping a close eye and that talking with you guys and having the conversation it's always going to be a big part of the show. So don't you worry. We're going to keep that no matter how big we get. Conversation with you guys is always going to be an important part of this show.
Around what you actually do, like how you should act and what you should attach meaning to. It's called value theory, and it's usually divided into two main branches. The first is ethics. You've heard of it. It's the thing that politicians are always said to lack and Jedi are supposed to have in great supply. Though, don't get me started on the prequels. In philosophy, though, ethics isn't just a code of what's right and what's wrong. It's the study of how humans should live with each other. Rather than just sitting around and judging people, ethics involves posing questions like, how should I live? Is there any reason that I should treat, say, strangers differently than the people I love? And for that matter, do I owe anything to myself? What about animals or the earth? And if I do have any of these obligations at all, where do they come from? Who says? Ultimately, whatever system you use to decide what's good or evil as human behavior goes is determined by your values. That's why ethics is considered part of value theory. But the other part of value theory isn't about what's right. It's about what's beautiful. Aesthetics is the study of beauty and art. Now, the concept of beauty is talked about practically everywhere, from the media to art school to barber college. But for philosophers, the pursuit of aesthetics involves considering what beauty is and whether it even exists.
And a lot of people are saying that it might not exist or that it shouldn't exist. Shout out to Indie Film. Welcome to the party. Said stoicism for the win. And I definitely appreciate stoicism for what it is. I think it goes a little too far in its own direction, but that's kind of, what Stephen Colbert is asking. Can you outline your philosophical stance so far as you figured out to this point? And so it's not necessarily a thing where I have like a 5 tenets of the Indian Jesusism. It's not necessarily stuff like that, but I'm very partial to Rene Descartes and his work. And again, we'll get into that. But the idea that you can't really know anything for sure, different ideas about how we learn to understand what is right and wrong, void of a God. And the understanding of that, basically just you want to be treated, you want to treat people the way that you want to be treated. It's not too much. It's not too much more complex than that. It just gets deeper depending on how complex the situation gets. And so as that's why, it's hard to just answer, well, what would I do in every single situation? It's more about the situation. And so by going through this, I'm hoping they'll bring up, well, I know that he's going to bring up a bunch of different situations where I'll be able to answer this a lot more clearly than just putting it right out there, So this is the overall kind of question as this comes out. Context, and not gonna lie, I had no idea what epistemology was. Can you explain it again for my dense noggin? So you can see here.
The pursuit of aesthetics involves considering what beauty is and whether it even exists. Aesthetics is a
So you see here, it says a branch of philosophy that studies the nature and scope of knowledge. So the question of how do you know the thing that you know? Epistemology is how did if this is the conclusion, how did you get to that conclusion? And the methodology of answering that question. How do you know what you know? That's epistemology. Context says, I'm loving stoicism, but trying to find a good balance other than be hard and just keep kicking ass. Yep, exactly. Steven said, are you not a philosophical naturalist? Generally, yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that is part of what we call nature is necessarily all that exists. So I don't know if that is exactly what you're asking, but again, as we go through this, and we'll get to learn a lot more about specifically, okay, in this particular instance, this is what Lutch thinks. So again, I'm a naturalist in the sense that I do think that there's nature and there's nothing else, but again, that gets complicated depending on what we're talking about. Shout out to Kevin Johnson. Welcome to the party. So yeah, I mean, if that's what you're talking about, then yeah, pretty much.
A part of value theory because beauty and art are things we value and evaluate. And many people who study this particular kind of philosophy, known as aestheticians, believe there is such a thing as the beautiful. Something that doesn't just depend on what you happen to find attractive, but something that's just objectively true. And finally, there's one more aspect of philosophy that I should mention because it doesn't ask questions so much as help us find answers. Yes, finally, some answers. And that thing, which I happen to think can be beautiful in its own way, is logic. Logic is the philosopher's toolbox. It contains the saws and hammers, the microscopes and beakers that philosophers use to go about answering their questions in a clear, systematic way. Logic is about reasoning, giving strong arguments that don't fall victim to fallacies, which are, as you will learn, the mortal enemies of philosophical precision. Okay.
If you can memorize the most common logical fallacies that people use, that in and of itself will help you understand people's arguments or the flaws in people's arguments so much better.
Okay, so metaphysics, epistemology, value theory, they might all seem pretty airy and abstract, but don't worry because you have already done philosophy, even though you might not realize it. You do it in almost every aspect of your life. Every time you argue with your parents or wonder if you should date someone or decide to eat a salad instead of a ham and cheese Hot Pocket, you are doing philosophy.
So King Nirvana asks, what are the stars next to everyone in the chat means? It means those are members of the channel. They have gone beneath the video here and hit that join button and have become a member of the channel. that not only gets them the members-only streams here on YouTube, but also full access to the Discord server and the after party. So you should join.
If you should date someone or decide to eat a salad instead of a ham and cheese hot pocket, you are doing philosophy. Because you're thinking about the world and your place in it. You're figuring out what you value, why you value it, and what you should do about it.
And that's kind of why the question, what's your philosophy? That's too broad of a question to just answer, at least at this point in the series. At least at this point, because depending on how much you know about philosophy, depending on how much I know about philosophy, and depending on how much I forgot about philosophy, I don't know that I can necessarily just give you all of the tenets. And I think one of the best things about philosophy, as opposed to religion in general specifically, is that when you're introduced to a philosophical notion, even if you can't regurgitate that and articulate that back to somebody, that doesn't mean that you don't have a general understanding of it, and you don't have to have a complete understanding of it to use it in your life. Again, as soon as an example comes up, I'll show you what I mean. But
so here's our plan. We're gonna learn about the major fields of philosophy, posing questions and considering possible answers along the way, and each time we will use a two-step method. First, we'll really try to understand. You're not gonna agree with all the ideas that I present to you, and I won't agree with them either. That's not the point. The point in step one is to really try to get inside of an idea, to understand it as charitably as possible. Then, in step two, you'll subject your understanding to some serious critical evaluation. Basically, you'll try to knock down what you think you know about a particular view of the world. And
this goes to the idea of the null hypothesis, that people don't necessarily try to knock down, like he said, they don't try to knock down their ideas, and so they have a lot of flaws in their logic because they've never come to it. Shout out to Carl Johansson. Welcome to the party. So most people's philosophy is utilitarianism. Jeremy Bentham, the best path is the most good for the most people. It can be used to justify monstrous things. Yep, and yeah, just what's going to be the best for the most people, it could also mean, you know, a lot of bad things for a slightly smaller number of people. But I'm gonna get all into that. This is more just an overview, and we're gonna get into specific parts, and then this one's gonna be more about argumentation. But yeah, like I said, this is gonna, you know, so far we're not getting flagged for anything with a copyright. So hopefully we'll be able to go through all of this, and this one's more about you know, building argumentation, but then we're going to get into more particular philosophies and ideas about how to look at things with a more comprehensive perspective. Stephen Colbert said Descartes did reintroduce skepticism as an approach to understanding, but then he went on to mind-body dualism and Proven God, which we're clearly losing the script philosophically. Yeah, and that's why I think it's okay to, you know, take bits and pieces of, you know, I like what this person said here, but I don't like what they said there, which is not dogmatic, which is a very good thing.
You'll do this whether you agree with the view or not. Why? Because only when you challenge your understanding of how some people view the world can you decide for yourself if theirs is a view worth having. Which leads me to my final point. Philosophy is not your usual field of study. I'm not going to be teaching you a body of knowledge where success means you know a bunch of stuff. Success in this course will mean that you know how to think. All we have are questions, and all you have is a brain. And the goal of philosophy is for you to use your brain to come up with the answers that make the most sense to you.
That's it. So, yeah, the null hypothesis, spelled N-U-L-L. I feel like this is context, and I feel like this is probably the most useful thing I've learned to do for myself and taught my wife. I never had a term for it, but I always want to question what I believe. There you go. That's the way to do it, and that's kind of what I meant. Where even if you've heard of something before, even if you've been exposed to something before, then you might be familiar with it, but not know how to use it in your life. And then you talk about it. And even if you don't have a full understanding of what it is, you can still apply it to your life, just like we're talking about right here. Well done, sir.
You'll
Well
learn
done.
how to formulate arguments to support your ideas so you can explain why you think you're right, which, if you've ever been on the internet, you know is something that not a lot of people are good at. In order to do that, you're going to need to understand philosophical reasoning, the tools we use to investigate life's most perplexing questions.
All right.
And that is where we're going to be headed the next time we meet.
All right, so let's head on to philosophical reasoning.
Aristotle once described humans as the rational animal. Well, actually, he said that man is the rational animal, but we don't have to be sexist just because he was. And if you've ever gotten...
So as I've said multiple times before, I'd be interested in a conversation with Andrew Wilson. I wouldn't necessarily be on the side of specifically libertarian ethics. That's not a conversation that I would frame as something that I would know better than somebody else. But I'm definitely open to a conversation, but I'm not interested in, like, he sees a very clear distinction between a conversation and a debate, and I'm not interested in a debate with him. But yes, I'm very interested in a conversation. Steven said there are many terms that are associated with philosophical naturalism, such as physicalism, materialism, body, monism, or scientism. You can take issue with any of these terms or their particulars. So yeah, let's not try to dive into the weeds. Like we'll get there when we get there. Clearly you got some knowledge, but let's just stick with what we stick with. Because if we try to throw everything in, that's why it gets confusing, because every conversation about this stuff assumes that you already know this stuff. Like if somebody doesn't really know what you're talking about, then this isn't helpful to them. So we'll get there when we get there. We'll get there when we get there. So let's just stick with what we're sticking with.
He said that man is the rational animal, but we don't have to be sexist just because he was. And if you've ever gotten into an argument with someone about religion or politics or which Hemsworth is the hottest, then you've experienced how irrational people can be about their opinions. So
I've never had an argument about religion with somebody.
What Aristotle meant is that rationality is our distinguishing characteristic. It's what sets us apart from the beasts. And no matter how much you disagree with someone about God or Obama or Chris Hemsworth, you can at least grant that they are not beasts. Because most of the time at least, people can be persuaded by arguments. You use arguments all the time. In the comments, at family dinners, with your friends. You probably just don't think of them the same way that philosophers do. When you try and convince your parents to loan you the car, or when you're talking up Crash Course to your friends, you are using arguments.
That's a good point. Then an argument, typically we think of somebody fighting. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're fighting with somebody because you're posing an argument. Those are two very different things.
Thanks, by the way. Each time you tell someone to do or believe something, or when you're explaining why you do or believe something, you are giving an argument. The problem is, the vast majority of people aren't really good at arguments. We tend to confuse making a good argument with, like, having witty comebacks or just making your points more loudly and angrily, instead of building a case on a solid foundation of logic, which can be harder than it sounds. But learning about arguments and strong reasoning will not only make you a better philosopher, it will also set you up to be a more persuasive person.
And in this day and age, it will help you to inoculate yourself against the propaganda and manipulation of people who are trying to convince you that their political thing is the best thing for you. Their thing is the best thing for America, or whatever it is. And so again, Stephen, you're jumping way ahead right now. We're talking about what an argument is and how to form an argument. So I get that you're down with all this, but don't take it personally if I'm not pulling up all this stuff, because that's going to derail the whole thing.
And strong reasoning will not only make you a better philosopher, it will also set you up to be a more persuasive person. Someone who people will listen to. Someone who's convincing. So yeah, these skills are beneficial no matter what you want to do with your life, so you might as well know how to argue properly.
Let's do it.
If you want to learn how to argue, then you should probably start around 2,400 years ago, when Plato was laying out how reason can and should function in the human mind. He believed that we all have what he called a tripartite soul, what you might think of as yourself or your psyche, divided into three parts. First, there's...
Good one. All right, this one. So this stuff is pretty visual and moves around a lot. So I'm gonna go without the captions. I think it'll be better and less distracting. But let's see. King Ivana said it all looks like a foreign, tiny language to my brain, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. And the problem with this stuff is that it is very accessible if you start at the right place. But as you can see, that like if you're not familiar with this stuff and you look at this, then you're just like, okay, I just don't understand that stuff, and you're gonna not be into it. And so that it's great that you can have these higher level discussions, which is exactly why I'm doing this, so that eventually that we can do this on this channel. But not everybody's there yet, and it's not because anybody's dumb or anything like that, but it's one of those things where somebody has to tell you, and then you just understand it. It's not necessarily that I don't know why I'm saying necessarily so much tonight, but it's not that it's so complicated. It's just that it's a thing that you couldn't know unless somebody taught it to you.
Tripartite soul, what you might think of as yourself or your psyche, divided into three parts. First, there's the rational or logical part of the soul, which represents cool reason. This is the aspect of yourself that seeks the truth and is swayed by facts and arguments. When you decide to stop eating bacon for 2 meals a day because, as delicious as it is, it's bad for you, then you make that decision with the guidance of the rational part of your soul. But then there's the spirited aspect, often described as the emotional part of the self, although that doesn't really quite capture it. The spirited soul isn't just about feeling, it's also about how your feelings fuel your actions. It's the part that responds in righteous anger at injustice, the part that drives your ambition and calls upon you to protect others. It gives you a sense of honor and duty and is swayed by sympathy. So if you decide to stop eating bacon because you just finished reading Charlotte's Web and now you're in love with Wilbur, then you're being guided by the spirited part of your soul. But we should
so it's like the you can have the emotion of anger, but what he's talking about when they talk about the tripart soul and the spirited aspect, they're talking about how that anger relates to your behavior. And so we talk about how beliefs lead to actions. That's exactly what we are talking about. We should definitely be more pro-science and less supernaturalist. I definitely agree with that.
Finished reading Charlotte's Web and now you're in love with Wilbur, then you're being guided by the spirited part of your soul. But we share the next part of our soul with other animals, be they pig or moose or aardvark. The appetitive part is what drives you to eat, have sex, and protect yourself from danger. It is swayed by temptations that are carnal and visceral. So those times when you go ahead and just eat all the bacon because it just smells so dang good, the appetitive aspect of your soul is in control. Now, Plato believed that the best
Yeah, exactly. And this is you'll find that this is going to be the case a lot with what comes up, that you're sort of familiar with it and you kind of already knew it, but it wasn't until somebody actually articulated it to you, you're like, oh, okay. And now because it's been articulated to you and it's something that's familiar, it's something that will stick with you very easily.
Best human beings, and I should point out here that Plato most definitely did believe that some people were better than others, are always ruled by the rational part of their soul because it works to keep the spirited and the appetitive parts in check. People who allow themselves to be ruled by their spirited or appetitive selves
are Plato's not about that base.
Are base, he believed, and not fully, properly human. Now, most of us don't buy into the concept of the tripartite soul anymore, or the idea that some humans are less human than others, but we do understand that we're all motivated by physical desires, emotional impulses, and rational arguments.
And that's really what it comes down to, is that we have, those three things are physical desires, if you get hungry, have sex, protect yourself, all that stuff, your emotions, and your logic. Steven said, I get that getting into philosophy as a small-time streamer won't be easy. It's already not been easy. But I'm gonna try. I'm gonna keep trying.
And philosophers continue to agree with Plato that reason should be in the driver's seat. So how do you know if you're good at it? How can you test your reasoning? Well, let's head over to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy. Throughout this course, we're going to apply our philosophical skills by pondering puzzles, paradoxes, and thought experiments. Because remember, philosophers love thinking about questions.
These will be fun. Whenever we head to the thought bubble, we are not the thought bubble like FTHOT. We ain't doing those kind of thoughts around here, but this kind of thought, the thought bubble, is where it's at.
Especially ones that don't have ready answers. So think of these exercises as philosophical wind sprints, quick tests of your mental abilities. And
these are all going to be different versions of the idea of when we talk about asking somebody, how would you feel if you didn't eat yesterday? The notion of being able to think about something that's not directly in front of you, it's all going to be stuff along those lines. It's not going to be about how you feel about something necessarily, but it's going to be based on something that doesn't happen. So we're creating hypotheticals, we're creating analogies, and that's the very cornerstone of being able to do philosophy any greater than am I hungry right now?
Here's a doozy from 20th century British thinker Bertrand Russell, one of the pioneers of what's known as analytic philosophy. Say there's a town in which all men are required by law to be clean-shaven. This town has only one barber, a man who must follow strict rules. Rule number 1, he must shave all men who do not shave themselves. Rule number 2, he must not shave any man who does shave himself.
So we have the 2 rules. So you have to be clean-shaven, and the barber must shave all men who do not shave themselves. The second rule is the barber must not shave any man who does shave himself. So as long as you don't shave yourself, you go to the barber and you get shaved. If you shave yourself, then the barber's not going to shave you.
It's the nightmare of every libertarian and every mustachioed hipster, but here's the question. Does the barber shave himself? Because think about it, the barber only shaves men who don't shave themselves, so if he does shave himself, then he must not, because the barber's not allowed to shave guys who shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he has to be shaved by the barber, because that's the law. Russell came up with this puzzle to illustrate the fact that a group must always be a member of itself. That means...
Shout out to TV Viewerski. Saying the barber's effed. Yeah, well, I mean, it depends. It depends on how you interpret the question. If you think that because he is somebody who is not shaving himself and then acting as the barber, that gives him the right to do so, then he has every right to shave himself. But if you're not separating those terms, then the barber, being a man who can't shave himself or didn't shave himself, can't then go to himself the barber. And so either way, you could see it either way, and there is no correct answer or incorrect answer.
Russell came up with this puzzle to illustrate the fact that a group must always be a member of itself. That means, in this case, that all men who shave themselves has to include every guy who shaves himself, including the barber. Otherwise, the logic that dictates the group's existence just doesn't hold up. And if the barber is a logical impossibility, then he can't exist, which means the reasoning behind his existence is inherently flawed. And philosophy doesn't tolerate flawed reasoning. So how do we make sure that we're ruled by good, sound, not flawed reason? By perfecting the art of the argument. An argument, in philosophy, isn't just a shouting match. Instead, philosophers maintain that your beliefs should always be backed up by reasons, which we call premises.
Hey, shout out to the Funk where are we going? Shout out to the Funk Master General. Welcome to the party. Send the barber can go to the dog groomer. But the dog groomer is still a part of the group. The dog groomer still has to be shaved by the barber. The dog groomer can groom dogs, but every man has to be shaved by the barber. Think about it. Welcome. Carl said he is a barber, so he's in a special position, right? Exception to the rule, there's always one. So yeah, in order for those rules to either those rules don't make sense, or the rule is that he can shave himself, and it's a hairy problem. Oh, come on. And so yeah, in case you guys didn't know, a premise is a proposition used to justify a conclusion. Nice one. Oh, where are we going?
Philosophers maintain that your beliefs should always be backed up by reasons, which we call premises.
Right. We always say the exception proves the rule. The exception does not disprove the rule. The exception proves the rule. Every rule has an exception.
Philosophers maintain that your beliefs should always be backed up by reasons, which we call premises. Premises form the structure of your argument. They offer evidence for your belief, and you can have as many premises as you like as long as they support your conclusion, which is the thing that you actually believe.
And so when you hear me talking, if you've heard me before say A plus B equals C, or A plus B equals C, and B plus C equals, well, how do I usually put it? A plus B equals C, and B plus C equals C. So A plus C equals C. Or I usually... How do I usually put that? A equals B and B equals C. So A equals C. There we go. That's how I usually put that. That's just a different version of these premises. You have logical, formal logic and informal logic. This is more of the informal, but that's along the same lines. So Commander said, right, but at least the barber can trust the dog groomer's skills more than they say, than say the carpenter. That's not the issue. The issue is that the dog groomer nor the carpenter, under the rule, has any more jurisdiction. It's not about whether they can do it or not. It's the jurisdiction. The dog groomer doesn't have the jurisdiction to shave people's faces because all men must be shaven by the barber. It's not about whether they can do it or not. It's about the rule that they have to be shaven by the barber. Phil said, plot twist, the barber is a female Eskimo who cannot grow a beard. That's no, that's not how it works. TV's not taking the barber gig. There you go. Fair enough.
Which we call premises. Premises form the structure of your argument. They offer evidence for your belief, and you can have as many premises as you like as long as they support your conclusion, which is the thing that you actually believe. So let's dissect the anatomy of an argument. There are actually several different species of arguments. Probably the most familiar and the easiest to carry out is the deductive argument. The main rule of a deductive argument is if your premises are true, then your conclusion must be true. And knowing that something is actually true is very rare and awesome. So here's a boiled down version of a good deductive argument. Premise 1, all humans are mortal. Premise 2, Socrates is human. Conclusion, Socrates is mortal.
So we see here, again, the deductive argument, it's very strong because we see all humans are mortal. That is, or so if we just take the argument itself. So if all humans are mortal and Socrates is a human, then by virtue of being a human, then the conclusion, we can deduce that Socrates is mortal. That goes into the validity of the argument. So after that, we get to the soundness of the argument. Are humans mortal or are they not? But the logic of the argument stands.
All humans are mortal. Premise 2, Socrates is human. Conclusion, Socrates is mortal. This kind of reasoning, where one fact leads to another, is called entailment. Once we know that all humans are mortal and that Socrates is human, those facts entail that Socrates is mortal. Deduction begins with the general, in this case what we know about human mortality, and reasons down to the specific, Socrates in particular. What's great about deductive arguments is that the truth of the premises must lead to the truth of the conclusion. When this happens, we say that the argument is valid. There's no way for the conclusion to be false if the premises are true. Now check out this argument. All humans are mortal, Socrates is a human, therefore Socrates was Plato's teacher. That argument is invalid because nothing about human mortality can prove that Socrates was Plato's teacher.
And so you can see that even though Socrates was Plato's teacher, it is true that Socrates was Plato's teacher, but that's a bad argument because whether humans are mortal or not, and whether Socrates is a human has nothing to do with whether, who was the teacher and student.
That argument is invalid because nothing about human mortality can prove that Socrates was Plato's teacher. As you might have noticed, there are plenty of mortal humans who never taught Plato. What's interesting, though, is that this argument does happen to have a true conclusion, which leads us to another issue, and that is validity is not the same as truth. All valid really means is that if the premises are true, then your conclusion can't be false.
If the premises are true. So you can have an argument, again, this is what I talk a lot about with leftist logic, with a number of things where the argument makes sense internally, that it makes sense to them, but it's just based on false premises. So all of the premises lead to the conclusion, but the premises aren't true.
Is truth. All valid really means is that if the premises are true, then your conclusion can't be false. But that doesn't mean that your premises prove your conclusion to be correct. Like in the case of whether Socrates was Plato's teacher, the premises are true and the conclusion is true, but the argument is still not valid because the premises don't in any way prove the conclusion. It just happens to be true. So if your premises don't guarantee the truth of your conclusion, then you can end up with some really crappy arguments, like this one. All cats are mammals. I'm a mammal, therefore I'm a cat. As much as part of me would like to be my cat, this is invalid.
So again, you can see how the premises do lead to the conclusion. If all cats are mammals and I'm a mammal, then I'm a cat. Well, okay, great. But that doesn't, because of the fact that that's not true, then that's not a valid argument.
Because the conclusion doesn't entail from the premises at all. I mean, all cats are mammals, but all mammals aren't cats, which means there are such things as non-cat mammals, which I am just one example of. And it probably goes without saying, but you can have a perfectly valid argument and still have a false conclusion if any of your premises are false. For example, all humans have tails, my brother John is a human, therefore John Green has a tail. The argument is totally valid because the premises entail the conclusion.
So this is what we're talking. This is this would be the leftist argument, that it's a valid argument that the premises do lead to the conclusion. However, the premises are not true.
The reasoning totally stands up. It's just that one of the premises is flawed. Since I'm reasonably certain that John doesn't have a tail, I've seen him in a bathing suit, this argument is not deductively sound. And a deductively sound argument is one that's free of formal flaws or defects. It's an argument whose premises are all true, and that's valid, which means its conclusion is guaranteed to be true. So, sound arguments should always be your goal. The reason that deduction is prized by philosophers and lots of other important kinds of thinkers is that it's the only kind of argument that can give you a real certainty. But it's limited, because it only works if you're starting with known true premises, which are hard to come by. And for what it's worth, deductive truths are usually pretty obvious. They don't tend to lead us to startling new information, like the fact that I'm not a cat or that John doesn't have a tail. So
yeah, this is the typically you can use this just casually in a conversation. If somebody is saying, if they're saying one thing and then separately they say another thing, and from you use those as their premises, then you can deduce that they believe a certain thing. Because if you say this is true and then you say this is true, well then it follows. That's what it means when somebody say it follows. It follows the track that this would be true. And you get I've learned that people don't understand that. And so when you connect dots for people, if you don't actually say, okay, well, you said this is true, and then you said that is true. So if those are both true, then this must also be true. If you don't actually articulate that and just jump to, oh, okay, so you believe the conclusion, then they might not be able to see that you're connecting dots. And I never said that. Like, I didn't say that you said that. I'm saying that you believe that. Shout out to Dylan Soup. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the party. Good to see you, brother.
Lead us to startling new information, like the fact that I'm not a cat or that John doesn't have a tail. So instead of starting with premises that are already certain, like deduction does, you're gonna have to know how to determine the truth of and your confidence in your premises. Which means you're gonna have to acquaint yourself with the other species of arguments, which we're gonna do next time. But today we talked about the value of reason, the structure of arguments, and we took a close look at one kind of argument,
deductive reasoning. So that's kind of again what. So that was one video. That's kind of what they're going to be. Each video will go through a bunch of these videos per stream. And as the further we get along, the easier it'll be to understand what we're talking about, because you'll have more of the background. So if you're still kind of on the fence, stick with me. I promise this is gonna get better. Carl said, is he talking about a real tail? Because humans have tiny evolutionary remains of a tail, right? I mean, we have a tail bone. I mean, if you want to count that, but I wouldn't count that as a tail. So we'll say yes. Context. So would you say most shit takes in politics and government is from lack of deductive reasoning? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Stevenson, classifying things helps so long as you don't oversimplify your classifications. So you should never call yourself any ism as an absolute rather than an emphasis. Exactly. That's why when you were initially asked, what is my philosophy? I'm not a this-ist or a that-ist. There's just a lot of different things that I've gathered throughout, my life. And I'm a Lutchist. I do what Lutch thinks is right. Context said that lack of deductive reasoning is from a lack of implementing the null hypothesis. Indeed, you got it. You got it. So let's move on to number 3, induction versus abduction.
How do you know that aspirin will take care of your headache? Why do you really want to see that new Marvel movie, even though you haven't heard anything about it, good or bad? Your ability to do things like predict how a
Remember when you weren't sure if a Marvel movie was going to get good press or bad press? Remember? Humans do not have prehensile. I don't know what that means. Their ancestors did. Yeah. Humans never had tails. Yeah. Again, I'm not denying that.
New Marvel movie, even though you haven't heard anything about it, good or bad. Your ability to do things like predict how a medication will affect you, or what movie you might like, or even things like what the perfect gift might be for your best friend, or what's the fastest way to get to campus. All of this stuff you know through induction. Deductive arguments are great because they give us certain answers.
And Guantex saying, he's like, oh, let's go. I talk like Destiny and Vosh now. And like you want to laugh at that. But the fact is that they have a very good understanding of all of this stuff. Whether you agree or disagree with them, if you were to have a discussion about this stuff, any of us, myself included, they would run circles around us because I don't know about any of you. So let me not, but let me just say, I'm just me and you, Gonzag. if we were to have this conversation, they would run circles around us because they understand this stuff better. And the more time you spend focusing on it and practicing it, then the better you are at implementing it into normal conversation. Now, the problem is that if you don't understand that you are over intellectualizing everything, then you can lose touch with the reality and the practicality of what you're talking about, which is what I think happens with both of them. But yeah, they definitely, yeah, exactly, they might understand it too much. That's a good way to put it. It's just about, and you could do this with anything, but I mean, look at Terrence Howard. Because he understands something. What did Eric Weinstein say? So most of this is bathwater, but there is some baby in there. Just because you know a little bit about something, and then you think you know everything about it, and it's not not ideal. And this is again why we should be skeptical of ourselves.
Stuff you know through induction. Deductive arguments are great because they give us certain answers. But unfortunately, much of the world cannot be summed up in a neat deductive proof. Deduction requires a fair amount of general information to give you a specific conclusion that is, frankly, probably kind of obvious. So philosophy, and basically, life as well, require that you have other ways of reasoning. And
so actually, let me amend that to what Guamtech said. So that would you say shit takes it's a lack of deductive reasoning and implementing the null hypothesis. So definitely the null hypothesis. But I think that there's so few things that we can know deductively, and we can know for certain, and for what we not 100% certainty, but what we would accept as like, oh, I know that for certain. Nobody knows anything for certain, but when you say that, it's these other types of arguments as well, or rather these other types of modes of understanding, and it's just a general thing that if people think there has to be a right answer to everything. Remember, in the first part, we were talking about how there's just going to be things that you don't have the right answer to, and you have to be okay with that. I think that is a big part of it as well.
So philosophy, and basically, life as well, require that you have other ways of reasoning. In addition to knowing how one fact leads to another, you also need to take what you've experienced before and use that to predict what might happen in the future. And you need to be able to rule out what can't be true so you can focus on what can. Through these kinds of reasoning, you're not only able to figure out stuff like how to fix your headache and why your roommate might be acting weird, you can also come up with better, more skillful arguments and counter-arguments, which are some of the most important maneuvers in the philosophical game. And maybe the best part—
So I thought he was going to read those things, but yeah, induction is just using past experience to predict what the future is. That's induction. I can induce that because every night when it gets dark, some kid plays with fireworks, that they're probably going to do it again, and Morty's going to be terrified of it. That's induction. And again, I don't have a deductive argument to prove for sure that I can tell the future that some kid is going to do that. So that's kind of what I mean. That deduction is one aspect of it, but again, induction, that this has happened before, so that can speak to the future. That's another reason that people don't understand anything.
To fix your headache and why your roommate might be acting weird. You can also come up with better, more skillful arguments and counter-arguments, which are some of the most important maneuvers in the philosophical game. And maybe the best part is, you already know how to use these techniques. In fact, I bet you've used them this very day. You know this.
So over the course of us doing this, I want you guys to pick your favorite quote, whichever one of these, and make sure figure out what it says, and use it in a comment without me noticing that you're using one of the quotes.
If you possess any ability to really predict the future, it lies in your ability to reason inductively. Inductive reasoning relies on the predictability of nature to reveal that the future is likely to resemble the past.
This is something that once when it came to Tim Pool, when somebody asked me, why do I like Tim Pool? Why do I follow Tim Pool? I didn't realize it when I was answering it, but it came from his powers of induction. That he's able to connect dots that I don't see other people connecting, and can predict that this thing is going to happen because he's looking at these past events and using induction to say, I think this is going to happen, and then he's right. Now, he's not the only one, but I'm just saying that's an example of that.
Deductive reasoning relies on the predictability of nature to reveal that the future is likely to resemble the past, often in important ways. For example, there's tons of research to support the knowledge that aspirin, acetylsalicylic acid, is an effective treatment for pain, like headaches. And you probably have personal experience with the effects of aspirin too. So you believe that this aspirin tablet will cure the headache you have right now because countless aspirin tablets have cured countless headaches in the past.
And you guys have seen me use the argument about gravity. And I'll say, how do I know what's going to happen with my vape when I let go of it? It's going to fall, because that's an appealing to induction.
Headache you have right now because countless aspirin tablets have cured countless headaches in the past.
Yeah, so Carl said, isn't there also a fallacy connected to this, saying that says you cannot always use past events to predict future behavior? Yes. So if I were to say, I know for a fact that some kid is going to play with fireworks because he's done it every night before, that would be a fallacy. That would not be a good argument. But if I were to say, I think it's very likely, then that changes the entire argument. And so that's why words are very important, and the particular words that you use are very important.
Headache you have right now because countless aspirin tablets have cured countless headaches in the past. Likewise, you want to see the new Marvel movie because you liked most of the other ones, so you believe that they'll continue to deliver for you entertainment-wise. But it's important to remember that unlike deduction, where true premises entail true conclusions, inductive premises only mean that the conclusion is likely to be true. Right.
So if we're not making a deductive argument about whatever, whatever it is, if we're talking about the fireworks, then if I'm making a deductive argument saying, well, every night they've done it before and it's a night, therefore conclusion, they are definitely going to play with fireworks, that would be an invalid argument. But as an inductive argument to say they do it every night and now it's getting dark and it's the summer again, therefore it's likely, then that's a good inductive argument. From the intro where the din and then there's a different quotes all over the place. Use one of those and sneak it in there if you can. Then it'll be fun. I don't know. Shout out to Bryson. Welcome to the party. We are talking philosophy and different types of arguments. So we can see that a deductive argument is saying that using facts or claims, which would be premises, to say that a conclusion is definitely going to be true. So that all, again, using what they used before was that all humans are mortal. Luch is a human. Therefore, the conclusion is that Luch is mortal. Luch is not going to live forever. That is a deductive argument that we could say for, and I mean, even still, we don't know you could make the argument that we don't know for sure that I'm not going to live forever. So maybe it's an inductive argument, but different types of arguments. Welcome to the party.
True conclusions. Inductive premises only mean that the conclusion is likely to be true. Inductive arguments don't provide you with certainty. Instead, they work in terms of probability. And they're useful for more than just predicting what's going to happen. For example, most men in ancient Athens had beards. Socrates was a man who lived in ancient Athens. Therefore, Socrates probably had a beard. This is an inductive argument because it starts with what we already know about the grooming habits of ancient Athenian men and about the time and place in which Socrates lived, and makes an educated guess based on that information.
So if you were to make a deductive argument saying, I know for a fact that Socrates had a beard, and the reasoning, the premises that you use were, well, most men in ancient Athens had beards, and Socrates was a man who lived. Therefore, I know for a fact that he had a beard. That would not be a valid argument, because it could be possible, despite the fact that most men have had beards, and the fact that he did actually live in Athens, that doesn't mean for sure that he had a beard. But now this is an inductive argument. So you're saying probably the idea that it is likely comes into effect.
There's no guarantee that the conclusion is correct, but what's known would seem to support it. Reasoning like this is incredibly useful, which is why it's so common, but there's also a problem. The future doesn't always resemble the past, and every pattern has its outliers. So induction always has the potential to produce false results. Aspirin might not work on a really bad headache, the new Marvel movie might be awful, and yeah, maybe a specific guy in Athens had a beard, but
When is this from? The new Marvel movie. What was the next Marvel movie after February 22nd, 2016? Oof. If only they knew.
it's possible he did. Movie might be awful, and yeah, maybe a specific guy in Athens had a beard, but it's possible he didn't. While the world tends to work according to predictable rules, sometimes those rules are violated. And you know what you need when that happens? A little flash philosophy. Off to the thought bubble. Contemporary American philosopher Nelson Goodman confronts the problems with induction using a thought exercise about a hypothetical substance called GRU.
All right, to the thought bubble, So we have a hypothetical substance called GRU.
According to Goodman's scenario, GRU is anything that's the color green before a certain time, a time that we will call T. And another
Okay, so anything that is the color green before a certain time. Interesting.
property of GRU is that while it's green before time T, it's blue after it. Now let's assume that we're living in a time before T.
Okay, so T is a specific time, but we're just not sure when that is. So we're calling it T. So the GRU is a thing that is green until whatever point in time, which is T, and then it becomes blue. And so now he's saying we are before T.
Green before time T, it's blue after it. Now let's assume that we're living in a time before T. T could happen 100 years from now or tomorrow, but we know that all the emeralds we've ever seen are green. So inductive reasoning lets us conclude that all emeralds are green and will remain green after time T, since emeralds have never been known to change color. But all emeralds are GRU because it's not yet time T and they're green, which is part of the definition of GRU.
So even though we all throughout history, we've seen that every emerald has always been green and has never changed colors and has never done anything like that, that it could be this hypothetical thing called GRU, because time T could be tomorrow, and tomorrow all the emeralds in the world become blue. Shout out to Kelly Green. Welcome to the party. With them emeralds. What is good?
Emeralds are GRU because it's not yet time T and they're green, which is part of the definition of GRU. So we have no choice but to conclude that emeralds will be blue after time T arrives. Now we've got a problem, because inductive reasoning has led us to conclude that emeralds will be blue after time T. But inductive reasoning also tells us that they'll remain green. Goodman's riddle reminds us that inductive evidence can be flawed or contradictory. It can make you think that you can predict the future when, of course, you can't. So
right, that's a big issue with people, in news, where they think that because in general, because they think they've been right so many times before, that they think they're going to be right always in the future. Not always the case. Shout out to Rotten Mouse. Welcome to the party. Said more of a Cane B enjoyer. Not familiar. I'm definitely down to check out some introductory stuff for philosophy. So if that helps, I will definitely check that out. Thank you. But welcome to the party. But that's always important. Like Hume said, it's a fallacy to presume that any future event will follow past physical laws. That being said, I will still bet anybody $100,000 that when I let go of my vape, it's going to fall.
there are times when you need to get at the truth in other ways, like by eliminating what's obviously not true and considering what's most likely. And for this, we turn our attention to one of the most important philosophical figures of 19th century England, Sherlock Holmes. In Chapter 6 of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Sign of the Four, Mr. Holmes says, and I quote, "When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." This is probably the best, most succinct description ever given of the kind of reasoning known as abduction. Which I know sounds like we're talking about kidnapping or something, but abduction is a thought process sometimes described as inference to the best explanation.
Yeah, I love this one. So this is a great example of how you can't use deductive arguments in every situation. God is love, and love is blind. Therefore, Ray Charles is a god. Got him.
Description ever given of the kind of reasoning known as abduction. Which I know sounds like we're talking about kidnapping or something, but abduction is a thought process sometimes described as inference to the best explanation. Abduction doesn't reason straight from a...
Oh yeah, I forgot he wasn't going to read those. So abduction is drawing a conclusion based on the explanation that best explains the state of events, rather than from evidence provided by the premises. The premises.
Sometimes described as inference to the best explanation. Abduction doesn't reason straight from a premise to a conclusion, as we've seen in deduction and induction. Instead, it reasons by ruling out possible explanations until you're left with the most plausible one given the evidence. Consider this. Anna told you she failed her physics midterm. Anna hasn't been in physics class since your teacher graded the exams. Anna has been in sociology class, which meets right after physics. Anna dropped physics. Now,
so again, we have Anna. Anna told you she failed her physics midterm. Anna hasn't been in physics class since your teacher graded the exams. Anna has been in sociology class, which meets right after physics, which leads you to believe that Anna dropped physics.
Anna has been in sociology class, which meets right after physics. Anna dropped physics. Now, with only these premises, we can't deductively or inductively prove our conclusion, that she dropped physics. But it's a justifiable conclusion because, given what we know, dropping the class is the most plausible explanation of events. We know she's not sick because she's still going to sociology, and we know she had a good reason to withdraw from the class because she was unlikely to pass. Concluding that she dropped the course makes the most tidy use of our information without leaving any loose ends. So let's look at another one. You and your roommate ate sushi last night. You both wake up with violent stomach aches. You and your roommate ate some bad sushi.
So again, here we don't have anything that even makes it more or less probable that it was sushi or something else. It's just a general way to think about it, that these things make sense. It ties together.
The mere fact that you're both sick doesn't prove that the sushi caused the sickness. Right. But given that you both ate the same thing and you both have the same symptoms, absent other information like that a stomach virus is going around your dorm, the best explanation is that the sushi caused your intestinal anguish. Now,
this leads into Occam's razor that you might hear people using all the time, that says the conclusion with the least amount of assumptions is usually the correct one.
Like that a stomach virus is going around your dorm, the best explanation is that the sushi caused your intestinal anguish. Now, like induction, abduction doesn't give us certainty, but it is a really useful way to get through puzzling situations when you don't have clear evidence from the past to help you out. Doctors use abduction a lot when they're diagnosing illnesses, and
shout out to Rotten Mouse for joining the Discord. Hope you enjoy.
detectives, of course, use it when piecing together evidence. You probably use it pretty often too. Just beware, because abduction must be used carefully. It uses only information you have at hand. That's why doctors and detectives work so hard to dig up more data and recreate events from the past so they can help draw better conclusions. Alright, now that we've looked at some argument types, let's find out how philosophers use arguments to interact with each other. Because philosophers don't argue like other people do. It's not like the conversation you have around the dinner table about whether the Patriots are better than the Seahawks or why plain M&Ms are superior to peanut, which is clearly a preposterous position to take. Philosophers hold each other to different, higher standards.
And after going through all this stuff and learning about this stuff, you will become more insufferable to people around you. TV said, especially if you're dating Anna, then you find out she was cheating on you during the physics class. I'm not bitter. I'm not. Oh, come on, Anna. Come on, Anna.
Is clearly a preposterous position to take. Philosophers hold each other to different, higher standards. They don't teach each other to get away with saying, I reject your argument because I don't like its conclusion, or that's preposterous, peanut M&Ms aren't so good. Instead, if you disagree with a conclusion, you need to give reasons, just like the first person did when they made their case. Both people involved in this kind of exchange are known as interlocutors, because we have to name everything. The first one advances.
Yeah, and so people participating in a dialogue, debate, or conversation. So if you and I are talking about what happened to Anna, Stephen and I are now interlocutors on the dialogue of what was Anna doing, and TV Viewerski is in another interlocutor.
Is an argument, and the second one can either accept it or offer a counter argument, which is just what it sounds like, an argument offered in opposition to another argument.
So Steven says, Anne was watching Indian Jesus instead of going to class. And I would say, well, counter argument. She was in the stream last night and I wasn't streaming at the time of her class. So it's very unlikely that she was watching my stream when she was supposed to be in class. That would be a counter argument.
Think back to Socrates and the beard. You think Socrates had a beard, and your reasoning is that most men in his time and place had them. I, however, think you're wrong, so I give you a counter argument. Gorgias, a contemporary of Socrates, said Socrates couldn't grow a beard and that he would sneak into barbershops and steal discarded clippings to fashion fake beards for himself. Therefore, Socrates didn't have a real beard. And I just want to point out that this is an actual philosophy conspiracy theory.
Really? Come on, man. You're clipping. Oh man, how do you know it's not? How do you know it's not pubes? Oh, that's some beta shit.
Gorgias was a real guy who differed with Socrates on many things, and the dispute was said to have gotten personal. According to accounts at the time, Gorgias actually spread the rumor that Socrates wore like a beard wig in an effort to shame and discredit his rival. I mean, how could you be a good thinker if you weren't a good beard grower?
Based.
Gorgias' gossip didn't go over well with everyone, and in this instance, let's say you are skeptical about it too. So you counter my counter-argument with a counter-counter-argument. Gorgias was known for being a gossip and for hating Socrates and trying to make him look bad. His fake beard tale seems wildly unlikely, therefore we can't take Gorgias' statement seriously, so we should fall back on the best information we have, which is that most of the men in his time and place had beards. And as you can see, arguments of different styles can be used in the same exchange. Like, the original argument about Socrates probably having a beard was inductive, but this last counter-argument is abductive, and that's fine. Arguments are meant to be useful, so we don't have to use the same kind of reasoning when we argue. This way of exchanging ideas through dialogue was popularized by Socrates, and so has become known as the Socratic method.
So, well, before we get to that, the different types of arguments there, it's not super necessary that you're able to tell, oh, that's an abductive argument, or I need an inductive argument here, or that's deductively this, that. That's not necessarily how it's going to be used, but the understanding that you want to take away is just that there's different ways to arrive at a conclusion, and based on how that conclusion, or based on how you arrive at the conclusion, should dictate how much confidence you have in that conclusion. Shout out to Equality and Defense Because Vagina over on Rumble said Gorgias sounds like a jackass. I would agree. Welcome to the party. Carl said Occam's razor says the most obvious cause is the likeliest cause. Hanlon's razor says never attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. Yep. Like I said, it was ancient Greece. They probably preferred the pubes. Oh, gross. Oh no. Oh man. So they conflict because sometimes there is a chance of incompetence, but the most obvious cause is malice. I mean, I don't agree with that part. Of course I spoke to you. Why wouldn't I speak to you? I'll type to you too. Hey, yes, welcome to the party. I just offered a whole new beer. There we go. So the Socratic method. This you may have heard before. This is a big one with Peter Boghossian, who has been on the channel. Check that out if you have not already seen it. He's his whole what is it? Street epistemology. Again, epistemology, the how do you know something, comes down to the Socratic method, learning through a dialectic exchange of ideas rather than a passive transmission of information. So it's a bit more structured than just kind of talking about a thing. It's a little bit more structured than that. Rotten Mouse said, are we against pubic hair or something? I don't want to look like a child. I'm just saying, no. Not pubic hair, but pubic hair on your face. Yes, I have something against pubic hair on your face. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want any pubes on my face, and I don't want to be friends with anybody who has pubes on their face. Yeah, don't look distinguished. Shout out to Hot Poop. Welcome to the party. So my favorite Socrates quote is, "We're all just wind in the dude. We're all just dust in the wind, dude." I think that was Plato, actually. Bryson said, like all great philosophers, Bill Gates once philosophized shaving is the fountain of youth. Oh, you guys are having fun with this one. All right, so the Socratic method.
Ideas through dialogue was popularized by Socrates, and so has become known as the Socratic method. Socrates thought dialogue was the best way to learn and to get at truth. And it's important to note that while philosophers have a reputation for being an argumentative lot, they don't think of the Socratic method as something that results in a winner and a loser. Rather, it's an exercise that brings both interlocutors closer to the truth. The goal of the philosopher is not to win, but to find truth. So
what do we always say? Stop trying to win the argument and just have the conversation.
You shouldn't be disappointed if someone presents a counter-argument that you can't find a response to. When that happens, a good philosopher will be grateful to their interlocutor for helping them reject false beliefs and build stronger ones. Today, you learned about two more types of philosophical reasoning, induction and abduction. You've seen their strengths and their weaknesses, and you've also learned about counter-arguments and the Socratic. This episode is some...
All right, so we're moving on to Leonardo DiCaprio and the nature of reality. Methinks some what's the movie? God damn it. Inception. Inception? Yes, I mean, thanks. Some Inception is coming up. Let's see what we got.
We've spent a couple of lessons
Nature of reality.
talking about how philosophers reason. Now it's time to do some actual philosophy. And one of the most important hallmarks of philosophical thought is that you should never take things at face value. You should always be willing to accept that there's more to the world than meets the eye. Because whatever truth seems obvious today might turn out to be not so true at all. It's one of the more daunting pursuits in philosophy, pondering what's really real as opposed to what you think is real and how you could ever know the difference. Fortunately, there are some guides who can help you on your journey when you're exploring the nature of reality. And you know who's really helpful here? Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, I guess you could say that a lot of actors can transport you to another reality if they're good enough, but that's not what I mean. I'm talking about Inception, that movie where Leo plays a thief who steals ideas from people by invading their dreams.
I called it! Quality and Deference said, what about Sun Tzu? Quote, it's always quicker to switch your sidearm than reload your primary weapon. Brilliant, brilliant. Right? That was straight from The Art of War.
A super handy ability if you want to, say, steal corporate secrets from a CEO or military plans from a head of state. But after a while, it becomes hard for some members of Leo's team to tell the difference between one dream and another, or to discern dreams from reality. The whole film is populated with people who live in a dream world, convinced they're living real life. To them, the dream is all there is. It has become their reality. But from the perspective of those outside the dream, who see their sleeping bodies, the reality they're chasing is simply false.
Who didn't see this in the theater? Like, how mad are you that you didn't see this in the theater?
Real cool premise for a movie. I haven't ruined it for you. You can still watch it. And the fact is, the same concept has been around for thousands of years. The basic question that Inception asks has vexed philosophers all the way back to the very roots of Western philosophy. Is it possible that my current reality isn't real at all?
Short answer, hell yeah!
And before we had Leo DiCaprio to walk...
Philosophy. There are two things a person should never be angry at. What they can help and what they cannot. Ooh, deep. Carl said, Inception is a take on Plato's Cave. We are definitely going to get into Plato's Cave. Maybe in this one. I think we might be going right there. What? I'm ready to have an Inception movie night. Like y'all guys are in charge of the Lord of the Rings and the Star Wars movie nights, but I will set up an Inception movie night. Not tonight, but I mean, I'll set it up tonight. What? Crazy. Quality and Deference said back when she was still a she. What you talking about, Wills? Steven said I saw it in the theater, but then I woke up and Ellen Page was Elliot. Oh no. Remember when she gotcha. That's what Equality was saying. Missed it. But the two of you together. Help me out with it. There we go. Back when she was a she. All right. We're all on the same page now.
Is it possible that my current reality isn't real at all? And before we had Leo DiCaprio to walk us through this question, we had Plato.
Yes. See, these are the quotes I'm talking about. Yeah, I got there eventually. Equality. I got there eventually. Where am I? Sometimes it takes me a minute, but I am off today. What is going on? If you ever rubbed one out to Ellen Page, you're gay now. Oh.
Around 2,400 years ago, Plato wrote his famous book, The Republic, in which he describes probably better than anyone before or since the nature of reality. He does it by telling a story about prisoners who have been chained since birth in a dark cave facing a blank wall. All kinds of people and objects pass behind the prisoners, and a fire casts the shadows of those things onto the wall in front of the prisoners.
So again, pay attention. If this is a big thing people talk about all the time. So these three prisoners are stuck in the cave, and they're facing the wall. There's a fire behind them, and there's all this stuff going on. So as you can see here, they can see the shadows of everything, but that's all they can see.
Passed behind the prisoners, and a fire cast the shadows of those things onto the wall in front of the prisoners. These shadow images are all the prisoners ever see, so they come to understand the shadows as reality. Now just hold up a minute and imagine what your view of the world would be like if all you've ever seen are shadows. You wouldn't know that there was anything more. 3D wouldn't even be a concept for you. The prisoners spend their whole lives understanding only this shadow reality, until one day one of them escapes from his chains and crawls into the daylight. After spending a lifetime in firelit darkness, the man is blinded by the sun at first, But in time, he comes to see the things outside of the cave are far more real than the shadow images that he once took for reality. They have more substance, they occupy an extra dimension. Think about how that would feel to suddenly realize that everything you believed just minutes ago turned out to be merely faint outlines of reality.
I don't know how I didn't put together that my whole thing about how there might be something more that can get us closer to God is yet another allegory for this allegory of the cave, or analog for the allegory of the cave. We'll talk about it in a second, because you may not have heard me talk about this, but I just had an epiphany. I just had an epiphany. This is so I can't understand why I don't use this more often. I'm not gay unless there's money involved. Fair enough. Whatever floats your boat. We don't judge over here. Well, maybe a little bit, but you know. Guantek said, why shouldn't you be mad at what you can and can't help? Because what you can help can be changed, so do it. What you can't help can't be changed, so why continue to worry about it if it won't help? Learn that one from reading into Buddhism. Yep. And then so you can see this, and most of you you already know what I'm going to say. You already know what I'm going to say, what this sounds like. The Serenity Prayer. That give me the power to determine what I can and can't change, and the power to change what I can, the strength to realize I can't, whatever the hell it is. You know, I mean, if you're an AA or whatever, but the Serenity Prayer is saying this exact thing. And so you'll see that ideas will show up all over the place in different cultures and different times, that there are universal truths that we have. But that doesn't mean that there's only one way to think about it, right? Yeah, that wasn't. There you go. Yeah, you got it. All right, so we'll finish this up and then we'll come back.
They have more substance, they occupy an extra dimension. Think about how that would feel to suddenly realize that everything you believed just minutes ago turned out to be merely faint outlines of reality. This is what happens to a lot of the characters who inhabit the world of Inception. Once they realize there can be multiple layers of reality, they never look at the world around them the same way again, and for many of them, the experience becomes intoxicating. This is also what happens to Plato's escaped prisoner. He goes back into the cave to tell his friends the exciting news about what he's found, but the conversation doesn't go the way he thinks it will. He expects them to be amazed by his discovery. He figures they'll be as eager to join him as he is anxious to get back. But
so he's in it. Guys, guess what? I found something more. And what do?
They all think he's crazy. As far as they're concerned, he's babbling about some higher reality that they've never seen or heard of or have any evidence for. To make matters worse, going back into the firelit cave after being in the sunlight temporarily blinds the man again. So from his friend's perspective, his journey into the outside world has actually damaged him, because now he can't even see the shadow images that were once his whole world. Now, you don't have to be Plato or Christopher Nolan to dream this stuff up. In fact,
right, and I'm realizing that I've thought this exact thing. And so Equality Endeavor said, you can't get closer to God, he's everywhere. And my thing as somebody who was born into the Catholic Church, confirmed as a Methodist, and then eventually became an atheist, is that I completely understand why people like religion, want religion, and all that stuff. I'm not trying to take religion away from anybody, but especially with Christianity, we're looking at a very old book, very old stories, and we have this idea that, well, we can never fully understand God because it's just outside of our capability of understanding. And fine, maybe that's the truth. So maybe, we use the screen as the limit of human understanding. And so my hand is outside the screen, that God is up here. You will never, ever get there. And if you follow Christianity, then you're going to get real close, right up here. You learn to talk to God and all this, and your spirit is fulfilled. But my question is always, how do you know that there's not something that will get you right here? This is the exact story that we just witnessed. How do you know that you're not looking at the shadows of the cave thinking, no, this is it. This is it. Now, the only difference is that I haven't actually been uncuffed, and I haven't actually gone out of the cave. But whether or not that's the case, nobody can tell me that, like, you haven't been out of the cave either. So you can't tell me that there is nothing else outside of the cave. And so whether or not you are a believer or a non-believer, then the position that I know for sure the shadows that we see on the wall are as complex as the world gets is silly. Of course, when we put it like that, when you look at the shadows, of course, you can't be saying this is all there is to the world when a homeboy just saw, just saw all of this stuff. And so I'm saying I haven't seen all of this stuff, but I'm proposing that maybe it exists. And those of you who are Christians are saying no, it does not exist. All that exists are the shadows. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I don't know. I'm not like this man who's been out of the cave. But how do you know that? How do you know that? I don't know. I think, we're getting into, shout out to Hicks and Gracie. Steven said, thinking we can leave the cave is the illusion. We are always limited in knowledge by the limits of our sense of perceptions. But you can leave a cave. Maybe you're trying to say something different, but you can leave. If you're in a cave, you can leave a cave. So this is not articulating what you want it to. Kevin Johnson said, Principia Discordia. You're going to have to look into that too. Will do. Bryson said, get out of the cave. Confirm what you believe. Get out of the cave. I'm working on it, brother. I am working on it. But the difference here with my personal message is that nobody has ever left the cave. Nobody has ever left the cave, yet everybody is very comfortable saying that getting out of the cave doesn't exist. I'm not convinced. Images
that were once his whole world. Now, you don't have to be Plato or Christopher Nolan to dream this stuff up. In fact, you might have experienced a diluted version of this kind of reality shock for yourself. For example, do you remember your first teddy bear? That bear was, philosophically speaking, your only contact with, and your only way of understanding the concept of a bear. Then one day, you went to a zoo or a wildlife refuge or a national park, and you saw an actual bear. And suddenly you realized that your previous understanding of bear was way off. Bears don't have little button eyes and smiles made of thread. They're not soft. You couldn't hug one. The bear you spent your first years of life snuggling with was just a shadowy imitation of the reality of bearness.
Yet still women decide that they would rather be in the woods with a bear than a man. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Equality Endeavor said, used to be Catholic too. What are the odds? Well, if you're an atheist, probably pretty high, because a lot of Catholics leave the faith.
Check out this somewhat more mature example. Maybe you were the first member of your tweeny group of friends to discover the wonders of romantic attraction. You might have felt like your eyes were open to a whole new world that your pals were still blind to. And when you tried to explain to them what had happened to you and how you felt, they probably thought you were crazy, and the feeling was probably mutual. And this is what our poor protagonist goes through as he re-enters the cave. So why does Plato tell us this story? It's not just about the little aha moments when we discovered that bears and boys were not what we once thought they were. It's more than that. Plato wants us to see that we, right now, are prisoners in a cave. Everything in our world is actually a mere shadow of a higher reality. Just as the man in the story once mistook shadows for real things, we are currently prisoners in a cave of our own. But rather than mistaking shadows for the material objects of the ordinary world, our mistake is thinking that the material objects of the ordinary world are the most real things.
And the other aspect is that there can be only one level of cave. There can be a cave within a cave within a cave within a cave. And so somebody who's, levels deep into a cave may use Christianity to understand more about just the material world. But then you could still leave that cave and be within another cave where you think that Christianity is the only way to experience spiritual fulfillment. And is not.
Our mistake is thinking that the material objects of the ordinary world are the most real things. In fact, Plato says, the physical world that we think is the most real is actually a mere shadow of a higher truth. If this surprises you, think about how many beliefs were once accepted as absolute fact only to later turn out to be completely false. The shape of the earth, the idea that the earth was the center of the universe, the belief that heroin and tobacco and lobotomies were good for people.
I mean, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, you know what I'm saying? Bryson said, but getting out of the cave is a physical action, which is easy to confirm or debunk. So first of all, we're talking about an analogy. So we're not talking about a physical cave. We're talking about a hypothetical cave. And so the cave is in your mind. The cave is the fact that you're not engaging with the full range of information that's available to you. It's just you're only looking at the shadows when more is available to you. It's not about whether you are physically in a place or not. But again, in comparison to my specific case, the whether or not there's something that I can confirm or debunk to say that we are or we are not in a cave would be some moral structure, and maybe not a moral structure, but some spiritually fulfilling aspect of something that is not tied to a god or gods that also is connected to morality. So it's a lot. You need the gnosis. Always need the gnosis.
Was the center of the universe. The belief that heroin and tobacco and lobotomies were good for people. Those so-called facts turned out to be far from the truth. So there's a lot packed into this little story. Plato is urging you to consider that the world is not really as it seems, and making a statement about philosophy. Doing philosophy is hard. Accepting that much of what you've always believed might actually be false can make you uncomfortable. You might feel temporarily blinded. You may learn just enough to know that your old beliefs aren't reliable, but you don't yet know enough to feel comfortable with these new ideas either. What's more,
don't forget, Morty is getting hungry down here. Every donation comes with a treat.
Your old friends who aren't on this journey with you might think you've lost your mind. Or they might take you for an arrogant, pedantic jerk who thinks they have all the answers. But philosophy is also awesome, because once you get through the growing pains, you can see things in a new way, and you can see through things that used to fool you. And that brings us to another puzzle. Consider this argument. No cat has two tails. Every cat has one more tail than no cat. Therefore, every cat has three tails. Now
What? Okay, so no cat has two tails. Every cat has one more tail than no cat. Therefore, every cat has three tails. I don't get it. I'm gonna need help here.
Every cat has one more tail than no cat. Therefore, every cat has three tails. Now you're probably thinking, that's just clearly wrong. That's not much of a puzzle. I mean, the two premises sound right enough, but the conclusion is what? This puzzle exploits the strangeness in the language that we use to discuss certain ideas. Specifically, the ideas of nothingness, absence, or emptiness. In premise one, no cat refers to an absence of cats. Think about things with two tails, and none of those things you think of are cats because you probably can't even think of anything with two tails. But in premise two, the language tricks us into understanding no cat as an existent thing rather than an absence of a thing. The way it's phrased, no cat could conceivably be that elusive creature that...
So it's called no cat. That which is called no cat has two tails. The thing over there that has two tails, it's called no cat. And so every cat has one more tail than no cat. Therefore, every cat has three tails. Interesting. Kevin said, so the javelin argument I heard from the Cosmos, a bit more like, yeah, there is one giant cave we can't escape, but we can keep throwing a javelin or shooting an arrow and we can find the barrier. Not sure what you mean. Sorry, not sure what you mean by that. Well, let's see who else finds it funny. Quality Endeavor said, if we keep going deeper into a cave, we may be playing Dark Souls. I don't know. I don't get it. Maybe you guys will find it funny. Steven said, going outside the cave for a bigger picture view should improve your perception and allow you to see common flaws in our reasoning. But your perception is always going to be limited. Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Has two tails. So this leads us to the conclusion that if the no cat has two tails and every cat has one more tail than it does, then every cat must have three tails, which is just wrong. And it takes a moment to understand the source of our confusion. The conclusion is faulty because it mistakes the absence of something for the presence of something. But it strikes us as plausible on some level because language has duped us into considering a reality where a creature called no cat with two tails is actually a thing. Figuring out puzzles like this is kind of like flipping a switch. First you're confused, and then the cause of the confusion seems obvious. It's just a matter of sorting through what's really real. And Plato thinks philosophy is like that too. Going from the darkness into the light is both disorienting and rewarding. It's kind of too bad in this case though, because a cat with three tails, I'd kind of like to see that. Though, to be honest, I mostly just like looking at any cat. And with that, we wrap up this episode of Crash Course Philosophy. Today, we learned about Plato's famous myth of the cave, questioned the relationship between appearance and reality, and talked about the process of philosophical discovery. Next time, we're going to disappear even deeper into the hole of shadow and disbelief.
Down the rabbit hole we go. So Carl said, have you ever studied Gnosticism? Because what you described in your thought experiment sounded exactly like Gnosticism. Yeah, I mean I'm again. It's been a long time since I've done a deep dive on any of this stuff. But the idea of what can be known and all that stuff is very fundamental to how I look at the world. So you didn't get the cat stuff. So going back to the idea of how we
you uncomfortable. You might feel temporarily blinded. You may learn just enough to know that your old beliefs aren't reliable, but you don't yet know enough to feel comfortable with these new ideas either.
So the idea is that you can have a statement that is true, that you may not understand why it's true, and the language around it may be the reason that you don't understand it.
More, your old friends who aren't on this journey with you,
Let's go.
You can see through things that used to fool you. And that brings us to another puzzle. Consider this argument.
So again, we're going back into, so this is more of a riddle than really anything else. The links don't work, Kevin.
No cat has two tails. Every cat has one more tail than no cat. Therefore, every cat has three tails.
So if we just say it like that, so no cat has two tails. So that's true, because every cat would have one tail or zero tails. But every cat has one more tail than no cat. Like, what does that mean? And then every cat has three tails. How does that even come into it? That doesn't make sense. But if you understand that no cat is the name of the thing, then it makes so instead of no cat, we'll call it Catno. Catno has two tails. And so if Catno has two tails, and all of the kitty cats have one more tail than Catno, and Catno has two tails, then every cat would have three tails. Now that's not true, but that's not a valid argument for the world, but it's internally logical. And so that's why we are talking about different types of arguments.
Now you're probably thinking, that's just clearly wrong. That's not much of a puzzle. I mean, the two premises sound right enough, but the conclusion is what? This puzzle exploits the strangeness in the language that we use to discuss certain ideas.
Which, again, is a big deal, why I talk about semantic obfuscation, because the way that you use words is extremely important.
What? This puzzle exploits the strangeness in the language that we use to discuss certain ideas, specifically the ideas of nothingness, absence, or emptiness. In premise 1, no cat refers to an absence of cats. Think about things with two tails, and none of those things you think of are cats because you probably can't even think of anything with two tails. But in premise 2, the language tricks us into understanding no cat as an existent thing rather than an absence of a thing. The way it's phrased, no cat could conceivably be that elusive creature that has two tails.
So think of it like a Pokemon. The Pokemon no cat has two tails. And so when you understand that, it falls right into place. And a shout out to Equality and Deference because vagina. Thank you for joining us. Hit that subscribe or follow or whatever it is. And do me a favor and put a like on the video. Thank you so much for stopping by. All right, so next we are getting into Cartesian skepticism. Let's do it.
A film for your philosophical consideration. The Matrix. You gotta remember the humans floating around in the vats of KY jelly, tubes and wires keeping them alive, stimulating their brains to make them believe that they were experiencing the real world, the world we all think we know.
Well, thanks to Andrew Tate, we can never, ever, 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 ever forget the Matrix.
Well, almost 20-year-old spoiler alert here. Some of them come out and find that the real world was a desolate wasteland, and the lives everyone thought they were living were just fabrications fed into their brains. A select few were rescued from the illusion, but some of them were so unhappy in the real world that they chose to return to the illusion. But Neo, and the others who chose to stay and fight, were the philosophical heroes of the movie, choosing truth at the cost of comfort and happiness. After watching The Matrix, you might have found yourself wondering, could this be true? Could we possibly be stuck in a dream world of someone else's making with no way to tell that our reality isn't real at all?
Maybe.
So, you are not the first person to have wondered about these things. In fact, the original Neo, the guy who really went into battle against the matrix of illusion in order to defend the truth, he was a 17th century mathematician named Rene.
Your favorite quote. Get your favorite quote.
Last time we talked about Plato and his belief that the ordinary reality of the material world is only a shadowy approximation of ultimate reality. Socrates, meanwhile, who was widely believed to be the wisest man in Athens, fretted about how little he knew. Philosophers spend a lot of time obsessing about knowledge, wishing they knew more, and worrying that they're wrong about what they think they know. They even, if you remember from the first episode, have a fancy name for the study of knowledge: epistemology. The philosopher who gets the gold star for taking this how do I know what I know paranoia to astonishing levels is the early modern philosopher, scientist, and mathematician Rene Descartes. When you watch
What if all I am is a Photoshop interpretation of myself trapped in a 21st century program called Crash Course? If you don't get why that's funny, you about to. Carl said Plato's cave is the flesh prison. He's going into Gnosticism now. Yep.
Watch The Matrix, you should congratulate the Wachowskis for giving us such a great sci-fi adventure story. But you should also remember that the archetype of the story actually has its roots all the way back in the writings of Descartes in the early 1600s. For a story like The Matrix to get off the ground, the audience has to be willing to entertain some level of skepticism. And a skeptic is someone who questions whether it's possible to know anything with certainty. And
believe in nothing except that anything is possible.
Descartes was the Mac Daddy of all skeptics. He was so skeptical we named a form of skepticism after him, Cartesian skepticism. Why was Descartes so skeptical? Well, he realized that many of the beliefs he used to hold were actually false.
Bullshit.
Y'all go through this, it's part of what we call growing up, learning those horrible truths about Santa and the Tooth Fairy. That you can't actually buy everything you want and need for just $100. That your parents don't really have all the answers. But realizing that he used to believe things that were false really got Descartes to thinking, because when he believed those things, he didn't realize they were false. So what if some of the things he still believed were also false? And
so you can see already where this is going to speak to somebody who, what are you doing, Mort? What are we doing? I know you're hungry. I know. We're hopefully somebody will donate soon. You can see how this is something that would speak directly to me as somebody who thought that my worldview was correct, that there was a God, that Christianity was what it was. And then I realized that, oh, I don't believe in that anymore. And that's exactly what he's talking about.
Those things, he didn't realize they were false. So what if some of the things he still believed were also false and he just hadn't realized it yet? How could he know that his beliefs were true? Well, after a bit of a freak out, Descartes realized that the only way to make sure he wasn't holding any false beliefs was to disbelieve everything, at least temporarily. He offered this as an analogy. Imagine you have a basket of apples and you're concerned that some of the apples might be rotten. Since the rot could spread and ruin the fresh apples, the only way to make sure there's no rot in the basket is to dump out all the fruit.
How's that? Riz? Is this what the kids call Riz?
Loser!
All right.
Offered this as an analogy. Imagine you have a basket of apples, and you're concerned that some of the apples might be rotten. Since the rot could spread and ruin the fresh apples, the only way to make sure there's no rot in the basket is to dump out all the fruit, inspect each apple in turn, and return only the fresh apples to the basket. Knowing
Okay, fair enough. You know, one bad apple spoils the bunch, right? What the hell does that mean? What the fuck does that mean? Fuck you. I don't know what that means, but I don't like it. So we have a basket of apples, and we're not sure if any of them are bad apples. But the only way to be sure is to dump them all out and go in check in. Okay, first of all, that's a Gen Z thing, and the fact that I'm making fun of it is the joke. But right over your head, that's cool. Anyway, you have a basket of apples. You don't know if any of them are bad. The only way to find out, you dump them all out and you make sure, okay, each one is, you check each one individually and you check out whether or not it's good and add that to the basket.
Dump out all the fruit, inspect each apple in turn, and return only the fresh apples to the basket. Knowing that...
Shout out to Marjorie. Welcome to the party. I am 34 years old. And there, oh, look at the gray hair. The gray hair. Oh my goodness. Welcome.
Out all the fruit, inspect each apple in turn, and return only the fresh apples to the basket. Knowing that just like rotten fruit, a rotten idea can spread and infect all the ideas around it, Descartes upended the apple basket of his beliefs and decided to start from scratch. If he examined each possible belief carefully and only accepted those about which there could be no doubt, then he'd know he was only believing true things.
Fair enough, right? If you examine each of your beliefs, just like the apple, you empty out the entire basket, and you say, I'm not believing anything. and only putting in the basket what I know I can believe, then it makes sense that you would only be believing true things. Seems if you put one rotten apple among the good ones, the rot spreads. So figuratively, if a person is a bad influence on others, there's a risk that this influence will spread. Yeah, that's why the bad apple, when they talk about the cops and they call a cop a bad apple, as if that's a way to absolve the rest of the cops. That's such a bad analogy, because the analogy is it's just one bad apple spoils the bunch. It's speaking exactly to this. So remember that that's the saying. It's just a bad apple. What does a bad apple do? Spoils the bunch.
Only accepted those about which there could be no doubt, then he'd know he was only believing true things. So Descartes began the arduous task of examining his beliefs one by one. He started with empirical beliefs, things we come to know directly through the use of our senses. And many of us think that our senses are the most reliable source of information. If I can see it, hear it, touch it, taste it, smell it, I must know it, right? Not so much. Descartes pointed out that our senses fail us all the time. You rush to catch up to a friend and realize as she turns around that your eyes played some tricks on you and you've just tapped on the shoulder of a perfect stranger. Food tastes wrong when you're sick. Drink too much and you feel like the
especially COVID.
Room is spinning. Water that's room temperature feels hot when you come inside after playing in the snow. The list goes on. You can probably think of countless times where your senses gave you faulty information.
And this is not anything new. You definitely know that your senses can play tricks on you. You've seen optical illusions. The Yanni and Laurel thing. That was an audio one. The blue and black or white and gold dress. All of these are ways that your senses are misleading you.
The snow. The list goes on. You can probably think of countless times where your senses gave you faulty information. And once you realize that, how can you ever trust your senses again? And for Descartes, disbeliever of everything, it got worse. Have you ever had a dream so vivid you thought you were awake? You've probably had that dream when you were dreaming, or you dreamed that you woke up from a dream, but in fact were still in the dream. Not everyone has had these experiences, but many of us have, and given that we don't always know that we're dreaming while it's happening, how do we know we're not dreaming right now? Maybe you just think you're watching Crash Course, but in fact you're cozied up in bed, dreaming about me. Which, hey...
How do you know you're not dreaming about me? You don't know.
Like, who could blame you? But really, when you think about it, can you be sure that it's not the case? Now, you might be thinking, okay, sure, I probably deceive myself from time to time without knowing I'm doing it, but dreams end, and when I wake up, I realize that what I thought I was experiencing was all in my head. And this...
And so he just said, the main thing. How do you know? How do you know? You have a perception, not a perception, a feeling that this is something that you know. But how can you check that feeling? I know that Morty is sitting on my lap. How can I know that? Well, I can feel him on, I can feel him laying there. I can feel his weight. I can see him there. But even still, it is possible that there's some physical force about that Morty's actually sitting, off camera somewhere where I can't see him. And there, because it's dark, the light is hitting a certain way, and that all of that is possible. It's not very likely. So inductively, I'm going to accept that Morty is actually sitting on my my lap. But again, the idea that our senses are perfect. Nah, homie. Carl said the Mormons being right in South Park is a joke on the Gnostics, a way of pointing out that in the spiritual realm, it's very hard to tell which fruit is rotten. It's impossible to tell. I agree, which is why we should not be dogmatic about what we believe.
Dreams end, and when I wake up, I realize that what I thought I was experiencing was all in my head. And the same is true for when my senses let me down. Those are just temporary instances isolated to a particular situation. As soon as the situation changes, I can realize that my experience was false. This quality, the ability to check in with yourself and figure out that you're experiencing a deception, describes what Descartes called local doubts. Those are doubts about a particular sense experience or some other occurrence at a particular point in time. Step out of that point and you can check to determine if you've been deceived. But what if everything is a deception? What if everyone is experiencing the same false reality from birth until death? What if nothing is as it seems, just like in the Matrix? This type of doubt, the kind you can't step out of and thus can't check, is called global doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just the beginning. This is just the first layer of all this. This is just the first layer. Global doubt.
And it's the subject of this week's Flash Philosophy. Let's go.
Flash Philosophy. Let's do it. Let's do it. This is 8 years old. Good thing philosophy doesn't change fast. Right. Yeah, I am very glad for that. And I mean, I remember originally watching through this and realizing how helpful it was to have an understanding of this stuff. It was before I was actually studying it in school, but yeah, very good that it didn't change. Context, I like it though. It's a lot, but I like it. And again, that's why it's so difficult to introduce people to this stuff, because I mean, you can tell that there's not a lot of people here. This is not going to be my my biggest stream, but I do want to do this because I think it's important for us to be able to understand this stuff and use this in our thinking when it comes to politics, because other people are doing it, and they're not all on our side. The thought bubble.
And thus can't check is called global doubt, and it's the subject of this week's Flash Philosophy. Let's go to the thought bubble. Philosopher Bertrand Russell illustrated the concept of global doubt with this troubling thought. What if the universe was created just 5 minutes ago? In this scenario...
Before we go through that, shout out to the Funk Master General with a $10 super chat. Thank you. So very much, sir. Let's get this out of the way. There you go. That's right. Every donation comes with a treat for Morty. What does the Funk Master said? I have waking visions of Morty ruling over the world one day. It's gonna happen. Don't you just keep your panties on. It's gonna happen. Thank you so much, sir. And of course, that makes you the new sponsor of the stream. Thank you.
What if the universe... For Bertrand Russell...
Let's go back to the beginning of this thought experiment.
And it's the subject of this week's Flash Philosophy. Let's go to the thought bubble. Philosopher Bertrand Russell illustrated the concept of global doubt with this troubling thought. What if the universe was created just 5 minutes ago? In this scenario, known as the 5-minute hypothesis, the creator of the universe could have designed many elements of the world to make them appear pre-worn, so as to seem old. From dinosaur bones fashioned by the creator and planted for us to find, to that scar on your knee put there by the creator along with the preloaded false memory of how you got it.
So this is what creationists, young Earth creationists, they legitimately believe that this is why there is, fossil records and, when they do the ice drilling and all that stuff. The reason that they give when we say we have physical evidence that the Earth is older than 6,000 years, they say that this happened. Carl said society used to be great because people used to care about philosophy. Yep, I'm bringing it back, baby. I'm bringing it back. Kevin said, Carl, only 5% of the populace used to be able to read. Philosophy used to be cared about as much as it is now. That's not true at all. You don't have to be able to read in order to be able to think. Now, it absolutely helps, but people had always been interested in understanding things. And so the reason that religion was so strong is because people couldn't read. But people always cared about the philosophy of it. It was just very easy to tell people, oh, it's this story, because they didn't know how to read. And, when people have the ability to question things, then it gets a lot easier for us to question what that is. Hey, shout out to Guam Tech for the 15. Did I read that wrong? Oh, damn, going hard with the $15 Venmo. Thank you so very, very much. Out sponsoring our boy, the Funk Master General, and that makes you the new sponsor of the stream. Thank you so very, very, very much, sir. All right, we got some new people. Welcome to M169. Welcome. So I understood this to be the mature Earth theory. Did I mishear that? So I mean, people might call it different things, but if you believe that God created the Earth in 7 days and it was only 7 days and it was 6,000 years ago, then this is going to be along the lines of what you believe. So welcome to the party.
Traded the concept of global doubt with this troubling thought. What if the universe was created just 5 minutes ago. In this scenario, known as the 5-minute hypothesis, the creator of the universe could have designed many elements of the world to make them appear pre-worn, so as to seem old. From dinosaur bones fashioned by the creator and planted for us to find, to that scar on your knee put there by the creator along with the preloaded false memory of how you got it. It seems crazy, but there's no way to prove that it isn't the case. The question for Russell was, does it matter? Descartes thought it did, but as a good Catholic, he couldn't fathom a world in which God would plant globally false beliefs in all of our minds. So instead, he posited the existence of an evil genius whose purpose in life was to deceive us, and who was clever enough to do it. Descartes didn't actually think such a being was likely to exist, but he realized there was no way to rule out his existence, and as long as the evil genius was possible, he worried that we were all stuck. Stuck in a radical skepticism in which we really can't trust any of our beliefs. Everything we believe, every sense experience, every thought, they could all have been put in our minds by the evil genius who created an illusory world so seamless we'd have no way of detecting the illusion.
So, oh, come on. So if you start there, if you start with everything we believe, every sense experience, every thought, they could all have been put there in our minds by the evil genius who created an illusory world so seamless we'd have no way of detecting the illusion. That's our starting point. That's our assumption as a way to get rid of false beliefs. Where are we here? Instead of get value out of many things, I don't see immediately see value in. There you go. So shout out to anybody seeing value. Show it out. Oh well. I mean, hey, I appreciate it. Either way, happy for it. There we go. Thank you. Carl said Bertrand Russell ran Beacon Hill School with his wife. They ran experiments on children involving the concept of free love. Sick stuff. Yeah, I mean, you go back far enough, or you go back past like the 1950s, and people the standards on what was cool to do and not cool to do it gets a little sus. That doesn't mean that, with things like Russell's teapot, that it's not a great idea, which again comes back to the fundamental thing that I want to be able to teach you guys and share with you guys is that you can take the good ideas and leave the bad stuff. So we can say Bertrand Russell had a great idea with Russell's teapot, but we get rid of the sick stuff with children. Simple as pie. Simple as pie. One of us is in the cave for sure. Thank you, sir.
Created an illusory world so seamless we'd have no way of detecting the illusion, just like the machines created for the characters in the Matrix. Descartes was at the point of despair, but then he realized something. He had cause to doubt everything except the fact that he was doubting. He knew he was doubting. He could be sure of that. And if he was doubting, then he must exist, at least as a thinking thing. After all, a doubt is a thought, and if there is a thought, there must be a thinker having those thoughts. So,
which leads us to, of course, you've heard it a million times before, I think, therefore I am. That's what that means.
Descartes decided that he couldn't know that he had a body. What he believed to be his body could have been part of the evil genius's deception, but he must have a mind, or he couldn't be having these thoughts. This was Descartes' aha moment. In his book, Meditations on First Philosophy, he declared, "Cogito ergo sum."
I was this close to getting a Cogito ergo sum tattoo, but as you get further into it, it's not as sound as you think, because theoretically, the notion of Ross on Friends thinking that he was on a break when, whatever it is that happened. Like, Ross thinks that, but Ross doesn't exist. So I think, therefore, thoughts exist. But that's getting deeper into the hole. And that's why I didn't get that tattoo. But this was so fundamental in me being able to create a worldview without, or after, rather, should I say, Christianity.
His book, Meditations on First Philosophy, he declared, "Cogito ergo sum." I think, therefore I am. It's one of the most famous realizations in philosophy. I cannot doubt my own existence. I can doubt everything else, but I can't doubt that I am, bare minimum, a mind having thoughts. This was Descartes' foundational belief, the first belief he put back in his apple basket. And from there, he figured he could build back up to more certain beliefs. Once he was certain that he was a thinking thing, he began examining his thoughts.
Right. So Stephen's saying, I think, therefore, I exist as a thinking entity of some ilk. There you go. Yeah. So it does technically. So it can break down for a fictional character, but the thoughts still exist. So the thinker still. You could also say that while Ross, I don't even know his last name, but Ross from Friends doesn't exist as a person in the real world, that the thought of the character of Ross exists. So he can think things because he's a character. But yeah, shout out to Descartes.
More certain beliefs. Once he was certain that he was a thinking thing, he began examining his thoughts. And one of his most clear thoughts, what he called a clear and distinct idea, was that God exists. He gave an argument for this, which we're going to examine.
Again, take the good stuff, leave the bad.
In a later episode. But for now, take my word for it, it's got some problems. And from there, he considered his beliefs about the physical world and concluded that it, too, actually exists. Ultimately, he determined God wouldn't allow him to have clear and distinct ideas that were false without some way to detect his own error. So he concluded the evil genius is not actually fabricating lies that consume our every waking moment. Descartes managed to reason from cogito all the way back up to having basically all the beliefs he started with back in his apple basket, which is the story of how René Descartes, with the power of skepticism, defeated the threat of the evil genius.
And so when I talk about doing the work, doing the philosophical work to build a worldview outside of religion, that's what we're talking about. That's what I'm talking about. It's not something that you just do. There's no book that you can read where it's just like, okay, here it is. It's work. See, instead, everything we claim knowledge of can only be less certain than our certainty level of our own existence as a perceiving being. There you go. There you go. There you go. All right. So moving on to Locke Burley and empiricism.
By the time we're done today, I just might have you questioning whether this apple is real or not. Think I can't do it? Give me about 10 minutes, I might have you wondering whether I'm a physical object or not. And the same goes for all this stuff. And for your computer, and Nick behind the camera, and you. How? By unleashing the power of empiricism.
Empiricism. So Kevin says, oh yeah, 100%. I kept asking for the Bible and God to be explained without referencing the Bible. And Descartes was the thinker that helped me reach that. I said, shit. Me too. Me too.
Last time, we learned about 17th century philosopher René Descartes and how he upended the apple basket that was his entire personal belief system and descended into a radical skepticism, only to emerge with his conviction that cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This one idea, the fact that he was thinking, or really the fact that he was doubting, allowed him to build back up, one by one, more beliefs that he thought he could rely on. But in the end, most of the beliefs that Descartes ended up putting back into his intellectual apple basket had to do with the immaterial world. Like, he decided that he could believe that he existed as a thinking thing, and he believed that God existed. Ultimately, he lit upon the idea that some of our thoughts are clear and distinct in a way that somehow guarantees their truth. But a lot of philosophers disagreed. They argued that thinking on its own wasn't enough. Like, just because you're thinking doesn't mean that your thoughts correspond to material reality in any reliable way. Basically, Descartes' philosophical opponents thought that the cogito was a dead end. So here we start to see a split between two different understandings of how we can most reliably get to the nature of reality, and therefore truth. Both were
that's at the top of the charts. What do we need? The nature of reality. What is the truth?
Understandings of how we can most reliably get to the nature of reality, and therefore truth. Both were responses to the constant questioning that is skepticism. On the one hand, there was rationalism, and on the other, empiricism.
So Rationalism is the belief that reason is the most reliable source of knowledge, while empiricism is the belief that sense experience, as we talked about before, sense experience is the most reliable source of knowledge.
Descartes, like Plato before him, was a lover of reason. He met skepticism with rationalism. He believed that the most real things in life were ideas, propositions that can be known through pure reason. Deductive truths, which we talked about before, fall into this category, and mathematical truths do too. But by contrast, empiricism is based on the principle that the most reliable source of knowledge isn't our ideas or our reasoning, but our senses. Sure, we can know things through deduction and basic logic, but what actually leads us to truth, or at least gives us our best shot at getting there, are things like induction and the scientific method, ways of thinking that tell us about the material world.
And so the reason that, these things today, that we want to combine these things, is that yes, while empiricism and our senses can fail us and mislead us, the idea of the scientific method and repeating studies, like I might have a bias, and so I do a study and I see things one way, but if we replicate a study 100 times, then the chances of that exact sensory glitch is near impossible. So yes, one person, one time, with one experience, their senses can fail them. But when we use empiricism, it's on the level of the scientific method, where we're repeating the studies to try to factor that in.
Like induction and the scientific method, ways of thinking that tell us about the material world. Probably the most famous split among philosophers between these two camps was the lifelong debate between Plato and Aristotle. Plato was convinced that truth
what does this one say? Although ideally these guys would agree, they both had phenomenal ideas. Good one. M169 said, I like this. We need to do a blending of the two to move forward. Bingo. Exactly. We need to understand what is what is real, in the sense that we've observed it and we've taken account for the glitches and flaws in our senses, so we could know for sure that this is true. And then what makes sense? Sometimes things just very clearly don't make sense. 2 + 2 does not equal 5. We don't need a study for that. We don't need to replicate that over and over. We know that that's not the case. We can take two of something, we can take 2 more of them, we can put them together, and we can see that it's not 5.
Camps was the lifelong debate between Plato and Aristotle. Plato was convinced that truth resided in the immaterial world of ideas, while Aristotle's attention was focused firmly on the ground. But what about in Descartes' day? If he was the original prototype of the navel-gazing philosopher, a living example of rationalist thinking, then his foil was the 17th century English thinker John Locke. This is where he was born. Locke believed that
I don't know. So I'm bouncing between, especially because this stuff is a little bit heavier. I'm gonna try to keep the captions on, and usually what's on screen he's already saying, so I'll move it around. But I don't know. Let me know if it's too distracting. Usually we have the captions and they're just one spot, but they use a lot of visual aids. So we'll rock with it. Let me know how it goes.
Was the 17th century English thinker John Locke. This is where he was born. Locke believed that we are all born as tabula rasa, or a blank slate. He argued that all knowledge is obtained through experience. He rejected the concept of innate ideas, the view that we are born preloaded with certain information, like what's good versus what's bad, or what is the nature of God. Locke thought that we are born knowing nothing, and instead all of our knowledge comes to us through sense data. But one place where Locke agreed with Descartes was in the idea that just because your senses tell you something, that doesn't mean you can trust it.
So Locke is saying that there's nothing that is inherent, that you're born as a blank slate, and only what you can see and sense can be known. And obviously now that we have a lot of things that are not like that, we can see that that's not entirely correct.
After all, sometimes your senses give you false information, like when you think you see or hear something that's just not there. Descartes' response to this, of course, was to just throw out all sense experience as an unreliable source of knowledge. But Locke didn't go that far. Instead, in order to figure out whether the senses accurately reflect the outside world, he introduced a distinction between what he called the primary and secondary qualities of all things. Primary qualities are qualities that physical objects themselves have. They're not in our minds, Locke argued. They're actually in the stuff. These primary qualities qualities include things like solidity, the density, weight, and mass of an object, and also extension, the height, depth, and width that a certain thing has. He also included figure, or the shape of an object, as well as mobility, which is this, whether it's stationary or in motion.
So just kind of the objective aspects of, a thing. Not how you feel about it, not do you like it, not any of those things. No, I have not read Steven Pinker's The Blank Slate, but hopefully I will be seeing him at Freedom Fest in a couple weeks, and I can talk to him about it directly.
Object, as well as mobility, which is this, whether it's stationary or in motion. So primary qualities, Locke said, belong to the thing itself. Take this apple. It weighs maybe 150 grams, it's the size of my palm, roundish but firm with the slightest bit of give, and right now it's moving through the air. Those are its primary qualities. But it has secondary qualities too, and by Locke's standards they are not real, at least not in the objective, agreed upon way. They're just in our minds, but they get there through the primary qualities. I'm talking about things like its color, taste, texture, smell, and sound. The secondary qualities of this apple are its redness, how it tastes and smells and feels on my tongue and hand, even how it sounds when I bite into it. Locke believed that the distinction between primary and secondary qualities explained the disagreements that we all have about our perceptions of the outside world. Like, we could measure this apple in a bunch of different ways and all agree on its primary qualities, but its secondary qualities would no doubt lead to some disputes. Like, is it really red? What kind of red exactly? Cardinal red or carmine red? It's kind of dark purple at the top, or is it just like a dark pink? What about the sound it made? Would I call that crunchy or crispy? Or I don't like that bitey? It's like apple sound.
Whether or not you think it's tasty or not tasty.
We could argue about that kind of stuff till the cows came home. But if we disagree about its primary qualities, one of us is simply wrong, because primary qualities have nothing to do with you or me. Instead, they have everything to do with the object itself. Locke's reasoning was simple, even elegant, extracting a lot of explanatory power out of very few basic concepts. As a result, it resonated with a lot of people. And one person it resonated strongly with was the Irish philosopher George Berkeley. He was moved by Locke's empiricism and took it seriously. So seriously, in fact, that he ended up using Locke's own logic against him. He basically took empiricism to its logical conclusion, dismantling the whole process of perception to the point that he had to wonder whether anything existed at all. Berkeley began by taking apart the distinction that Locke made between primary and secondary qualities. Like,
as you can tell, I'm not super familiar with this aspect of secondary and primary quality.
think about this apple again. How do you know its shape? Locke said the apple's shape as a primary quality is immediately perceivable. But Berkeley pointed out that you don't perceive some qualities of an object while totally disregarding others. Like, you can't detect an apple's shape without first, or at least also, detecting its color. When you think about it, you can't detect any of the primary qualities without also considering the secondary ones. You can't see a colorless apple. You can't feel a textureless apple. In fact, if you try to strip away the apple's secondary qualities in an effort to get at the primary ones, you end up with no apple at all. Try it. Close your eyes and imagine an apple made of only primary qualities. So it has a certain shape, a certain size, but it doesn't have any color or texture or taste. You can't do it. You try to imagine it with no color, but really you're probably imagining one that's either black or white or transparent, the color of what's behind it. And if you try to imagine it as having no texture, you'll find that there's still texture there. It's just smooth. Remember, Locke asserted that secondary qualities are not objectively real. They can only be subjectively perceived.
So they're not objectively real, and they can only be subjectively perceived. However, they are tied to the primary qualities, which are objectively real.
But now, Berkeley has shown that the two are inextricably linked. You can't have one without the other, which means that the primary qualities can't be real either. They too are just what your mind makes of things. So this led Berkeley to a startling conclusion. There's just no such thing as matter. There can't be. Instead, there's only perceptions. Berkeley's famous assertion, his version of cogito ergo sum, was esse est percipi. To be is to be perceived. In his opinion, there are no objects, only perceivers. And even then, the perceivers themselves don't really have any physical form. They're just disembodied minds, perceiving things that aren't really there.
So you'll see as we go through some of this stuff, as he mentioned in the beginning, that you'll agree more or less with some of this stuff. You'll resonate more or less with some of this stuff. And while I do think it's an interesting topic about whether the characteristics of something are secondary or primary, this doesn't necessarily speak to me in the same way that cogito ergo sum does. I don't necessarily think that perception is, as much as we say perception is reality. Where are you going? What are you doing? You are going to hurt yourself. Just lay down. As much as we say perception is reality, and I think that's a useful concept, I don't think that's really what he's talking about here. And this is a little bit more esoteric.
Form. They're just disembodied minds perceiving things that aren't really there. A little bit terrifying when you start thinking about it. In Berkeley's scenario, we're all set adrift in a world of nothing but thought. What's scary about this is that if everything's just perception, then when the perception goes away, there can't be anything left. So, like, please, for the love of Pete, do not turn away from your computer. If you stop perceiving me, I stop existing.
Right. That's the silliness. Like, just because you're not watching my stream doesn't mean that it's not there, and we can prove that from the replay. Carl said Gnosticism is heavily into this concept too, that all matter is just a projection of our minds. I disagree, but that's what they believe. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree either. What? I don't know what you're talking about. Context said, sounds like this is exactly what the woke has perverted to push their ridiculous ideas. Oh yeah, philosophy goes both ways, guys. Don't think that this is all going to be in line with, enlightenment ideas. Some of this stuff is going to be out there, and some of this stuff is going to be, yes, exactly, esoteric. The foundation for where we get some of these crazy out there ideas that you see today. Yeah, exactly. At the beginning. Exactly.
But what if maybe you don't care about me? Still, you'd better not go to sleep, because as soon as you do, you'll cease to exist, because you won't be able to perceive yourself. The only guarantee that you'll continue to exist in your sleep is to have a friend watch you when you're sleeping, which probably...
So let's move on to the next one, the meaning of knowledge. So guys, this is, yes, the meaning of knowledge. We are now on the 7th video. And again, we are going to make this into a series where we go through the whole thing, but we are past the 2-hour mark. So if you would like to keep the party raging, then you know, how to do it.
You probably think you know a lot of things, but do you know what it means to know something? We've spent quite a bit of time discussing beliefs and knowledge, but we haven't really been specific about what we mean when we talk about those things. Thankfully, philosophers love a good definition. They have very specific and lucid ideas in mind when they use terms like know, or believe, or proposition, or justification. And about 10 minutes from now, you too will know what you're really saying when you use those words. But just because these terms have been defined doesn't mean that philosophers aren't still arguing over them.
Of course.
Because, that's how philosophers do. Yep. Their definitions might seem kind of obvious at first, but the more you think about them, the more nuanced they turn out to be. Like, is having knowledge of something the same thing as being correct? Or if you believe something to be true and it is true, does it matter if your belief in it is justified?
Ooh, I like that. If you believe something to be true and it is true, does it matter if your belief in it is justified? That's an interesting question. So now, again, we're getting back into stuff that personally speaks to me a little bit more. Steven said, Berkeley took solipsism too far. It's good to remain humble that our perceptions can never be real, but presuming they are false would be instrumentally irrational. Yeah, you can't make well, and yeah, that's the same thing as going the other way, that if you're assuming something that you don't know. Quantec said, not really finding myself a fan of John Locke at this point. I'm sure there's value. It just sounds a little bit like bullshit so far. And yeah, a lot of it will. But understanding what these people think is the value that we are getting in terms of, do I want to follow up more with what this person thinks and this person's philosophy? So it's not all going to hit, but it's all going to be useful.
And can you be right about something without really trying? Answer to these weird questions and more await you, as well as cats. So you've heard this already. Philosophers love a good argument. But you've figured out by now that philosophers argue in a different way than like kindergarten kids or internet trolls or other people who confuse arguing with sniping back and forth or just thinking up witty comebacks. Nope. Philosophers have all kinds of rhetorical devices at their disposal that they can use to advance an idea or call into question the ideas of their interlocutors. So in order to hold your own in a philosophical debate, you're gonna have to know the difference between two things that sound like exactly the same thing, an assertion and a proposition. And you'll need...
Can anyone tell the difference without Google, the difference between an assertion and a proposition before he articulates it to you?
To be able to tell when someone actually knows what they're talking about or if they just believe what they're saying might be true. For example, the sentence I'm saying right now is an assertion. An assertion is a linguistic act, either spoken or written, that has a truth value. And despite what it might sound like, truth value isn't a measure of how right something is. It's just the state of being either true or false or indeterminate. All declarative...
Hey, I'll give you that. Certain levels difference. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Sentences have truth values. Declarations that assert something about the past or present are either true or false. And assertions about the future are indeterminate, at least when they're expressed, because no one knows if they're right or not yet. For example, I'm going to assert that this cat will pee on my desk before the end of the show. That assertion has a truth value, but it's indeterminate because the show's not over yet.
Well, the fact that you're thinking about that is why dogs are better than cats.
Yet. We're just gonna have to wait and see. Now all this contrasts with other kinds of linguistic acts like questions which don't assert anything. This is a cat is an assertion as opposed to is that a cat, which is a linguistic act but not an assertion. But the substance of what you assert has a name too. The content of your assertion is your proposition. It's the underlying meaning of what you're saying. So even though an assertion itself can change depending on, say, what language it's spoken in, its meaning doesn't change just because its outer packaging does. Like, this is a cat and este es un gato both assert the same proposition. And a proposition is true if it asserts a claim that corresponds to reality. The proposition, when I assert this is a cat, is true if the object of the this is in fact a cat, and false if it is anything other than a cat, like this is a cat. It's worth pointing out that attitude counts too when you're asserting something. A speaker's mental state toward the proposition they're making is their propositional attitude. If I say, like, this is a cat, but I actually believe it to be a rat and I'm trying to fool you, then philosophers would say that I have a propositional attitude of disbelief. Whereas if I think I'm speaking truthfully, I have a propositional attitude of belief. And of course, you're not going to get very far as a philosopher unless you understand the classic definition of belief itself. Based on the lingo you've learned so far today, belief is just when you take a propositional attitude of truth.
So let's stop there. So there was a lot there, a proposition and assertion, and we have belief. So a proposition is basically just what you mean to convey, and an assertion is making a declarative statement, and a belief is an attitude of truth behind that proposition.
I believe that this is a cat if I think it's true. That is, if my attitude is that the assertion corresponds to reality. And even if I'm wrong, even if there were an aardvark on my desk, or if there weren't a cat on my desk at all, which there isn't anymore, if I really thought there was a cat on my desk, that would just be my belief. My propositional attitude, in other words, is what determines if I have a belief.
The important part there being that the cat does not need to be on the desk in order for him to believe that the cat is on the desk. So the belief has to do with whether or not it is, or the attitude of truth, not the legitimacy of whether or not it's true. Carl said, if everything is an extension of our collective mind, you can easily justify theft. How could you steal something that doesn't exist and could be instantly replaced by thinking it? Yep. Yeah, not a good way to look at the world.
Would just be my belief. My propositional attitude, in other words, is what determines if I have a belief. What all this means is that I, like everyone else, can have false beliefs. Simply thinking something doesn't make it correspond to reality, which is what's needed for truth. But of course, the fun of arguing is showing off what you know to other people, or at least producing really clever evidence to support your case. So this raises the question of what it means to actually know something in the philosophical sense.
What does it mean to know something?
Traditional definition of knowledge is that it's a justified, true belief. Note that there are three separate components here.
They always do that.
Is that it's a justified, true belief.
So justified, true, and a belief. So let's go backwards and belief, because we understand that complete 100% certainty is not available unless we're talking about the things that fall under sheer logic, like math. Other than that, then we don't have certainty with anything. So it's a belief. It may be a very, 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 very strong belief. I believe that I am broadcasting to the internet right now. I have very strong reason to believe that. I can see my face on the thing. I can see that it says live. I'm saying things and you guys are responding to the things that I'm saying. We're watching things, you're responding. So so it's a belief. Is it true? I mean, as far as I know, it is true. And I just kind of, well, if I'm back, then we're good. Fuck you. You piece of shit. So the belief part, the true part is whether or not I actually am on the internet, or if there's something going wrong with all the metrics and I'm not actually on the internet. But again, there's reason to believe that that's not true, and that's where we get into justified. So it's justified because of all of the reasons that I just gave. So a justified true belief is knowledge.
Note that there are three separate components here. So I have knowledge that this is a cat if I first believe that it's a cat, and also it must in fact be a cat. That is, my belief corresponds to reality and is therefore true. And finally, I can be said to have knowledge about the cat if my belief is justified, meaning I have some sort of legitimate evidence to support my belief. Now, we've already defined truth and belief. Justification is simply evidence or other support for your belief. If you remember back to episode 2, you will recall that premises offer justification for conclusions, and justification can come in a variety of forms. Most often, it comes about through testimony, just taking someone's word for it. Not all testimony is strong or trustworthy, of course, but if it comes from some...
Preach on that. Not all testimony is true. Let's see, now this is, we enjoy you, we tease you. Yeah. Let's all laugh at lunch.
Taking someone's word for it. Not all testimony is strong or trustworthy, of course, but if it comes from someone who is an expert on the topic in question, you might consider the testimony to be reliable. And the fact is, most of what you know about the world, you learned through testimony. You took your teacher's word for it when they were teaching you stuff, and the same goes for every book you've ever read.
Unfortunately, we take the teacher's word maybe too closely. It's not... Think about how much better the education system would be if questioning the teacher was a positive thing. Of course, they're just there to get everybody in the corporate structure, so they want you to just fit in and conform and all that stuff. But think of it if we were actually educating kids and that was a normal thing. Different world.
Took your teacher's word for it when they were teaching you stuff, and the same goes for every book you've ever read and every news report you've ever seen. They're all just forms of testimony, which you accepted as justification for your knowledge and your beliefs. But justification can come in other forms too. Another common type is first-person observation, information you acquire through your senses. If I believe that a cat is a cat because I already have robust and well-informed beliefs about cats, then having had extensive experience with them in the past, I'm identifying the cat as a cat through my direct contact with it. It looks, feels, acts like a cat, ergo cat. But philosophy wouldn't be any fun if the key to knowledge were that easy, right? Until American philosopher Edmund Gettier came along in the 1960s.
Doesn't Gettier any better than this? Shout out to Edmund Gettier.
Philosophers were in pretty widespread agreement about the definition of knowledge, that it's justified true belief. Because you can believe any old thing, but in order to know something, it just makes sense that you also have to have evidence for your belief, and it must be true. In other words, you can have a false belief, but you can't have false knowledge. And if something you thought you knew turns out not to be true, then the fact is you never actually knew it. You just believed it. And likewise, you might happen to hold a true belief, but if you don't have any justification for it, if you just accidentally happened to be right, which happens sometimes, that doesn't count as knowledge either. Enter Edmund Gettier. Gettier wrote a short but fabulously influential paper that turned the standard understanding of knowledge upside down. He did this by proposing what have come to be known as Gettier cases, situations in which one can have justified true belief, but not knowledge. Which brings us to this week's Flash Philosophy. Let's go to the thought bubble.
All right,
here's one of
Flash
Gettier's original
Philosophy.
cases. Smith and Jones have both applied for the same job. The president of the company told Smith that Jones will get the job. This counts as evidence. The president of the company would seem to be a reliable source of this information. Meanwhile, Smith counts the coins in Jones's pocket and sees that there are 10 coins in there. Smith then forms a belief based on his first-person observational evidence of the coins as well as the testimony of the company president. He comes to the belief that the person who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. But it turns out the testimony of the president was false, and it's Smith, not Jones, who gets the job. And it just so happens, unbeknownst to Smith, that he also has 10 coins in his pocket. So Smith has a belief that the person who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket, and that is justified because he counted Jones's coins and the president told him Jones was getting the job. And his belief also turned out to be true. The person who got the job did have 10 coins in his pocket. However, neither pieces of justification actually pointed Smith to the right answer. The president's testimony was wrong, and the 10 coins that he saw were in Jones's pocket, not his own. So it seems Smith simply lucked into being right. Gettier argued that we now have a case of justified true belief that is not knowledge. As he pointed out, you don't know something if you simply stumbled into the right answer. Thanks, Thought Bubble. The philosophical world was turned upside down by this idea, and philosophers, loving a good counterexample, began generating their own Gettier cases. American philosopher Roderick Chisholm proposed this one. Looking across a field, you see an object that looks like a sheep, and you form the belief that there is a sheep in the field. It turns out that the object...
Okay. All right. Let's slow this down a little bit. We had a bunch that just happened, and I missed it because my mouse was not working. First, let's grab what we got here. That's why this isn't funny. Because when something goes wrong, it's like Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. All right, you want to come back up here, Mark? Come here. Come on. Come here. Let's see. He's staring at me. Come on. Come, fuck you. Okay. So Carl said Scott Adams uses the you weren't right if you had no way of proving you were right argument a lot when he's wrong about COVID. It drives me nuts. Right. And so that goes to exactly what you're saying, that just because you don't know why something is right doesn't mean that you're wrong. So I'm gonna back this up a little bit. I missed, I need to, where were we? Right about here. I just missed this whole thing. I was not paying attention, so...
You can't have false knowledge. And if something you thought you knew turns out not to be true, then the fact is you never actually knew it. Okay. You just believed it. And likewise, you might happen to hold a true belief, but if you don't have any justification for it, if you just accidentally happened to be right, which happens sometimes, that doesn't count as knowledge either.
So that's what Carl is saying that Scott Adams said, that just because you happen to be right, because of the fact that you didn't know for sure that you were right, the position that you held isn't right, which is stupid. Context, so this sounds like the bullshit they would try to use to gaslight us on COVID and us being right about it. You weren't knowledgeable. You were just lucky. Exactly. Everyone is wrong about everything. Pretty much.
Enter Edmund Gettier. Gettier wrote a short but fabulously influential paper that turned the standard understanding of knowledge upside down. He did this by proposing what have come to be known as Gettier cases, situations in which one can have justified true belief, but not knowledge. Which brings us to this week's Flash Philosophy. Let's go to the thought bubble. Here's one of Gettier's original cases. Smith and Jones have both applied for the same job. The president of the company told Smith that Jones will get the job. This counts as evidence. The president of the company would seem to be a reliable source of this information. Meanwhile, Smith counts the coins in Jones's pocket and sees that there are 10 coins in there. Smith then forms a belief based on his first-person observational evidence of the coins as well as the testimony of the company president. He comes to the belief that the person who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. But it turns out the testimony of the president was false, and it's Smith, not Jones, who gets the job. And it just so happens, unbeknownst to Smith, that he also has 10 coins in his pocket. So,
well, yeah, but you weren't right, because so Smith doesn't actually have the job, according to people like Scott Adams and what you guys are saying. Smith does not actually have the job, because we didn't know that the person who has 10 coins in their pocket is going to get the job. That's not actually correct. Or rather, no. Smith does have the job, but there's not actually 10 coins in his pocket.
what?
That's how stupid people can be.
So Smith has a belief that the person who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket, and that is justified because he counted Jones's coins and the president told him Jones was getting the job. And his belief also turned out to be true. The person who got the job did have 10 coins in his pocket. However, neither pieces of justification actually pointed Smith to the right answer. The president's testimony was wrong, and the 10 coins that he saw were in Jones's pocket, not his own. So it seems Smith simply lucked into being right. Gettier argued
that doesn't make him wrong. If you luck into being, what is true is true. Full stop. What is true is true. And so if you align with that position, whether you mean to be or not, you are correct. Complex said all this is just proving to me that the social engineering engineers and powers that be use many of these philosophies to make us feel stupid and in turn not make any kinds of decisions. Bingo. Yup. That's why we're doing this. That is exactly why we're doing this.
We now have a case of justified true belief that is not knowledge. As he pointed out, you don't know something if you simply stumbled into the right answer. Thanks, Thought Bubble. The philosophical world was turned upside down by this idea, and philosophers, loving a good counterexample, began generating their own Gettier cases. American philosopher Roderick Chisholm proposed this one. Looking across a field, you see an object that looks like a sheep, and you form the belief that there is a sheep in the field. It turns out that the object you see is actually a dog. Yet there is also a sheep obscured from your vision by a hill. So you have a justified true belief, but the justification for your belief, the object that you saw, is not a sheep. You just lucked into being right.
So let's use this as the example and map this onto COVID. And so what this would be is that the original sheep, there's a sheep in the field. So that this would be let's say that this is the vaccine or the vaccine risk. So this is the risk of the vaccine. This is the risk of the vaccine. There's a sheep in the field, so the sheep is the risk of the vaccine. So somebody's saying there's a risk of a vaccine out there. And everybody in the news and the politicians, they were all looking at this and they're saying that's not a risk. That's not a risk. But it turns out that this was actually here. There were actually risks there. It doesn't matter whether you were looking at this or not. The fact that this is here is all that matters. Because we're not talking about a sheep in the field. We're talking about risks to your health. And so whether the risk is here or is here, if somebody says there are risks to your health, and somebody is looking at this and saying, no, there are no risks to your health, and then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Now we can have a discussion about why you thought with this information, you thought there were risks. Even though you happened to turn out to be right, you had bad reasoning. That's a conversation that's worth having. But saying that this sheep does not exist or that the risks do not exist is wrong. Quantec said normies won't go half this deep into philosophy, so they think they can use it to just make them feel stupid. That's why so many people just appeal to authority today. Oh, they must be smarter than me. Bingo. Yep. Steven said we should all feel stupid because relative to how smart we could be if we worked harder at it, we are stupid. Facts. Carl said the Hegelian dialect is the social engineer's favorite philosophical tool to manipulate society. There's plenty of them. Funkmaster General says, when I said everyone is wrong about everything, does that include me being wrong about the statement? I don't know. What do you guys think? Steven said, if you don't enjoy learning, it may be instrumentally rational for you to avoid studying philosophy, science, history, sociology, psychology, and statistics. I would disagree. I would just say you gotta get used to it. Get used to not knowing what you're talking about and working through that and figuring it out. Like, not everything is going to be understood on first pass. Not everything is going to come in a step-by-step guide. And sometimes you kind of just have to wade into the water without knowing how to swim, and you figure it out on the way. 169, so to quote Brett and Heather Weinstein, You can argue. You can argue the shot is effective. There's no way you can say it's safe. There you go. There you go.
Or your belief, the object that you saw is not a sheep. You just lucked into being right. Once you understand how it works, it's pretty easy to generate Gettier cases of your own. And many philosophers today think Gettier successfully destroyed the justified true belief definition of knowledge. But even though the 1960s might seem long ago to you, remember, philosophers are in the business of having millennia-long debates about stuff. So it shouldn't surprise you that the philosophical debate about this is still raging. But if knowledge is not justified true belief, then what is it? Next time, we will look at one possible answer. In the meantime, you learned about some of the key concepts we use when discussing belief and knowledge. You learned what defines an assertion and a proposition, and that belief is a kind of propositional attitude. We also talked about forms of justification and the traditional definition of knowledge, which Edmund Gettier totally messed with using his Gettier cases. And the cat did not pee on my desk, because the cat was unable to spend any time at all on my desk.
All right, all right. Eerie, shout out to the Eerie Fairy Tales. Said yes, effective, depending on something. Welcome. Steven said, but enjoying learning as much as possible is the best approach to flourishing life for me. I agree. And again, I think that's why I want to, that's why I so badly want to do this, is that even though, I know that, we're probably not going to do very well, but the fact that I'm going to have this playlist, and I set it as a podcast, so you can listen to however that works. I don't know exactly how that works, but I set it as a podcast, so maybe maybe this will be more for Fridays. But we're gonna go through the whole playlist. We went through. This was 7 videos. There's 40 more videos to go through, and they get deeper and deeper and deeper into this. And I get that it's not always the most exciting stuff, but I think it's important enough that we do it, and especially with you guys, help me out and supporting me while I'm doing this, even though we're not getting a lot of views. The fact that you guys are here to support me really gives me the freedom to do something that isn't maybe as flashy and sexy. Oh my God, Candace Owens did this, or Trump did that, or whatever. Obviously those are going to get more views, and it's going to be easier to bring people in and stuff. But that's not that's not what I want to do, is just talk about whatever's going to get the most views. I want to talk about what's most important, and we're getting to that place where I think that a lot of you are starting to trust that maybe I got something going on, even if it's not necessarily your wheelhouse. You check it out and see what it is, and we can all get on the same page and learn a lot more and have higher level discussions about things. Harry said she loves this kind of stuff. Word up. Well, this is only the first one. If you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because again, this is only the first, and we're going to go through the entire series. Guys, if you are a member, make sure you join the after party. We are headed right as soon as this is over into the after party to hang out. If you have not already, just join as a member to get access. But even if you are not a member, it is absolutely free, completely free to join the Discord. Let me drop the link one more time. I don't know where all my mods are, but yeah, it's absolutely free to join. But we just won't have access to the after party, which is going to be a good time. Thank you so very, very much for hanging out. Big shout out to the Funk Master General, and of course the sponsor of the stream, our boy Guam Tech. Thank you so very, very much for hanging out, guys. I really, really do appreciate you. Once again, this is Morty, and I am your host, Lutch, aka the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Until next time, guys, we are out of here. Peace.